Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Kid Naruto Saved Karin. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
With the sun rising over the horizon, birds singing, and all other animals waking up for their daily routine, it was just another typical morning. One thing, though, was strange about this image. On October 11, 2000, the largest and wealthiest of the hidden villages, Konohagakure, was shown in ruins. Kurama no Kyubi. Around 2,000 years after the Jubi were vanquished by the sage. It had been a disaster the night before. Unexpectedly showing up in the center of the village, the Kyubi no Kitsune, who hadn't been seen since the Shodai Hokage's time, launched an unrelenting attack. Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, was the only man who could stop the raging beast. He sealed the Kyubi inside a newborn child because it was impossible to kill it, but it came at a high cost. He died shortly after the seal was finished after being impaled through the stomach by one of the Kyubi's claws. As they were still grieving over the losses of the day before, the villagers had started to rebuild the village. The young Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto, was being cared for by the Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who was sleeping in a cradle on the Hokage desk in the Hokage Tower. Surprisingly, the cradle hadn't even been damaged during the Kyubi's attack. When Minato passed away, Hiruzen was essentially thrown back into power. Even though he really wanted to, he was unable to adopt Naruto because no one would be available to watch over the boy while he was at work because his own wife, Sarutobi Bawako, had been one of the many people killed in the attack. Of course, he could probably give the child to one of his two children, but Sarutobi Mito, his daughter, detested the Kyubi for killing her mother and would likely not see Naruto as anything other than the Kyubi incarnate, and his son, Sarutobi Asuma, had been gone for years. Kurama no Kyubi. In case you missed it, Mito is named after the wife of the Shodai Hokage, who also happens to be Konohamaru's mother. When Hiruzen heard a knock on the door, he snapped out of his reverie and said, "Come in." One of the strongest shinobi in all of the elemental nations and a former student of Hiruzen, Jiraiya of the Sannin, entered through the door. After shutting the door behind him, Jiraiya proceeded to Hiruzen's desk and took a seat in the chair that was there. Jiraiya said, "I heard what happened. Where's Minato and Kushina?" Hiruzen just gave the table a dejected glance, which was all Jiraiya needed to know. "I see." Hiruzen looked at the cradle out of the corner of his eye and said, "Minato and Kushina risked their lives to protect the village from the Kyubi, and paid the ultimate price. But, their legacy still lives on." Jiraiya had now noticed the cradle and the boy sleeping in it. Jiraiya turned to face the cradle and said, "Is that?" Hiruzen nodded. "Hi. That's Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yellow Flash and the Red Hot Habanero, Minato and Kushina. He's also the Kyubi's Jinchuriki," Hiruzen replied. Jiraiya questioned, "Uzumaki?" inquiring as to why he had been given his mother's last name. Hiruzen said, giving him his mother's name would protect him, especially considering that there are still many Uzumaki scattered around. Jiraiya nodded in agreement. "You know how many enemies his parents had?" Jiraiya looked his sensei in the eyes and remarked, "His life still won't be easy though. You know how Jinchuriki are treated, don't you?" "Yes. I've been thinking of ways that I could at least make life a little easier for him, but," Hiruzen replied. Jiraiya responded, "In that case, I've got a suggestion for you." "What is it?" inquired Hiruzen. "I'll take him under my wing and train him until he's old enough to enter the ninja academy," Jiraiya replied. I think I like that idea. Take him with you and return here to the village a week before his academy days will start. Hopefully people won't recognize him as the Kyubi Jinchuriki," Hiruzen responded. Jiraiya remarked, "That's exactly what I was thinking." Hiruzen said, "Then take Naruto and go." Jiraiya got up and picked up the cradle, being careful not to wake the infant, before turning to go. Before leaving through the door, Jiraiya said, "See you in 6 years, sensei." A young girl who appeared to be around 4 years old lived in a small village in the land of grass. She was either from a low-income family or lived on the streets because of her short red hair, pink eyes, and dirty rags. As if she were invisible, no one seemed to notice her as she moved through the streets. Then, as if she had noticed something, she abruptly stopped walking and raised her head. A man with pale skin and eyes that resembled snake eyes was standing on the roof of one of the buildings. He had hid behind a handy tall pipe when the girl abruptly turned to face him, and when he noticed that she was still walking, he grinned and licked his lips. "This one will work out well." The Kusagakure deep in the land of grasses forests lay the village of Kusagakure. Like all the other secret villages, it was bustling with activity as the locals went about their everyday lives. Two individuals in particular stood out among the many others in the village. Among them was a tall, white-haired man with long hair, dressed primarily in red, wearing red shinobi sandals and a red Hite.8 with a forehead protector that bore the kanji for oil. A 4-year-old boy with cerulean blue eyes, spiky blonde hair, and a white T-shirt featuring a red spiral on the back and the symbol of a flame on the front was perched on the man's shoulders. In addition, he wore blue shinobi sandals and gray shorts. The most peculiar thing about this boy, though, was that he had 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Naruto said to the boy, "Hey, Jiraiya Sensei, why did we come here again?" Jiraiya only told half the truth when she said, "Well, first I've got some business with the village leader." He wanted to finish some research, but it's also true that he had business with the village chief. The blonde looked up with a smile on his face as Jiraiya said, "Of course, while I'm meeting with him, I want you to work on your chakra control. You'll need to get a lot better if you want to master jutsu like the Rasengan." A while back, some missing nin attacked them, believing they could defeat someone like Jiraiya. However, the Gamma Sennin sent them all flying, even taking down the leader with a Rasengan. Jiraiya concluded that he might as well begin training the boy because Naruto had expressed an immediate desire to learn the move. The girl with the red hair kept moving through her village's streets. She was beginning to feel uneasy. She wasn't sure what it was, but she could tell that something wasn't right. She was born with the ability to sense chakra, but it was different from other chakra sensing abilities. She even knew if someone had a special power, though she wasn't sure how or why. A Kekkei Genkei, also known as Kura no Kyubi. A man with pale skin suddenly materialized in front of her, and she felt a terrible chill go down her spine. She said, Who are you?" The man said, "Kukakuku. You could be quite useful to me, girl." And then turned to leave, but after a few meters, he halted and turned to look behind him before saying, "Follow me." The girl stood for a few more seconds before following the man as he went on his way. Jiraiya and Jiraiya approached the leader of Kusa's office and knocked on the door. He was sure the boy would stay out of trouble, so he had left Naruto in the inn where they would be staying for a while. Jiraiya entered the room as a voice on the other side said, "Come in." A man in his 30s who had the Kusa Hite.8 on his forehead was seated in a chair at his desk. In addition, he wore his village's traditional Chunin, Jonin uniform. The man said, "Ah, Jiraiya Sama, welcome. You don't have to refer to me as Sama anymore. Kusakiri, you're the leader of your village now," Jiraiya replied. Jiraiya nodded in response to Kusakiri's question. "True enough. Will San do?" Jiraiya said, "Anyway, why was it that you wanted me to come?" "Right. The reason I wanted you to come here was because I've got news for you regarding you." "No. Who?" Kusakiri replied. "Voldemort, Kurama no Kyubi." Jiraiya mentioned, "I'm listening." Afterwards, Naruto. Naruto was sitting in the lotus position with his hands in the Hitsuji sign in his and Jiraiya's room. There was an open scroll on the floor in front of him, and another scroll balanced on his head, which he secured with chakra. Jiraiya walked into the room and said, "Hey, Naruto." Naruto was startled out of his reverie and the scroll on his head dropped to the ground. Naruto shouted, "Hey, I was trying to concentrate here. Naruto, I want you to stay here and practice your chakra control. I'm going out for a while." Jiraiya said prior to adding, "Oh, and I also want you to master Sunshine no Jutsu by the time I return." Naruto's voice was filled with disappointment as he said, "Okay. Look, if you master Sunshine, I'll have a surprise for you when I get back," Jiraiya replied. Naruto asked excitedly, "Oh, Nandezu ka? Nandezu ka? Kurama no Kyubi. What does the Japanese term, Nandezu ka, mean?" Naruto looked down in dismay as Jiraiya said, Now, hold your horses. If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, now would it?" "Well, then. I have to get going, so work on that sunshine of yours till I get back." "Okay," Jiraiya said. After leaving the room, he went downstairs and exited the inn. It seems that Jiraiya's old friend Kusakiri had found an underground facility nearby that simply shouted, "Orochimaru." About a year ago, Jiraiya had lost Orochimaru's trail, so he was relieved to have the opportunity to find it again. After that, he strolled through the streets before leaving through the gates of the village. Orochimaru's hiding place. Orochimaru and the girl went into what looked like a laboratory. Orochimaru declared, "This will be your work place for the time being." The girl inquired, "My work place? What will I be doing?" Orochimaru stated, "Helping me with my experiments." Looking up at the Sanin, the girl said, "Experiments? What experiments?" Orochimaru looked down at her and said, "Well, first of all, you." Jiraiya kept a close watch as she made her way through the forest toward the hideout. He then moved in the direction of what appeared to be a well that was close to the path. A well? As he had gotten closer to the well, Jiraiya thought, and there seems to be a snake design on it. After jumping into the well and landing in the center of a hallway, he looked around and said, "All right. Where will we go next?" Then he heard what sounded like a young girl's scream, and he immediately turned to look down the hallway in the direction of the source. He kept running until he reached a corner, at which point he halted and turned to see Orochimaru leaving a room and traveling the other way from Jiraiya while giggling uncontrollably. Jiraiya crept to the door and into the lab as soon as he thought the insane Sannin was out of earshot. After entering, he noticed a girl hunched against a wall and approached her, observing her red hair. This girl. She's an Uzumaki, he thought. I thought Naruto was the only person left, but then the girl's head jerked toward him. The girl thought the man in front of her was collaborating with the insane man who had brought her there, so she asked, "Who are you? And what do you want with me?" Jiraiya knelt down in front of the girl and embraced her, saying, "Don't worry. I'm not working with that bad man. I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" he asked. The girl, who is now known as Karin, said, Karin. Karin shook her head when Jiraiya asked, "Do you have any parents?" She uttered. Jiraiya inquired, "Do you have anywhere to go?" Karin said, Jiraiya stood up and said, "Well, I can't just leave you on your own, so I guess I should take you with me." Karin looked up at him, wondering who he was. Oh, and the name's Jiraiya, by the way. That clarified the matter. Naruto and Kusa Naruto was still training in his and Jiraiya's room as the day was coming to an end. He was currently weaving a series of hand signals while standing on one side of the room. Sunshine no Jutsu. He abruptly disappeared and reappeared on the opposite side of the room a moment later. "Yosh! I did it, finally!" he exclaimed, pumping his fists into the air. As he opened the door, Jiraiya remarked, "Well, I see you mastered the Sunshine. Although it seems he still can't do it without using hand signs. Well, at least he's made some progress, and to master even such a basic jutsu at such a young age, now that's really something." Naruto shouted, "Ah, Jiraiya! Sensei!" before he noticed a girl hiding behind the Sannin's leg. "Huh? Who are you?" he asked. Jiraiya looked down at Karin, who then emerged from behind the man's leg and said, "Hey, now, don't be shy. Come on, say hello." Hello," Karin interrupted. He pointed to Karin and said, "Hey, Naruto, I found you a little playmate." Naruto exclaimed, "Hello, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Datbayo," with his signature foxy smile. Karin said, I'm Karin." Naruto remarked, "Karin, huh? That's a nice name." Karin said, Arigato." The following day following their awakening, they had determined that Karin needed to change out of her filthy rags. She reportedly liked Naruto's shirt, so she switched to a pink one with the Uzumaki crest on the back. She also wore brown shorts and blue shinobi sandals. Karin had wished to go with them, and they later went to one of Kusa's training fields to complete some training. "Alright, Naruto, I want you to build up your chakra, and try to perform the Sunshine no Jutsu," Jiraiya replied. Karin said, Jiraiya. Sensei, is it alright if I train with Naruto-kun? Jiraiya and Naruto turned to face her, and she flushed from the attention. Karin nodded in response to Jiraiya's question, "Do you know how to use chakra?" Karin replied, "Hi. Though I've had to learn it on my own." Jiraiya questioned, "Can you do the Sunshine?" Karin said, "Hi." Jiraiya said, "Alright. Go and stand next to Naruto and build up your chakra." Karin followed Jiraiya's instructions. After that, Naruto and Karin began to strengthen their chakra, but while they were doing so, Karin began to notice that Naruto had a darker, more powerful chakra. "This chakra is really dark. What is it?" As she turned to face the blonde, she thought. Jiraiya arched an eyebrow at the girl's terrified look. Could she? It's not possible. Even if she had sensory abilities at such a young age, they wouldn't be able to detect Naruto's Kyuubi no Kitsune. However, she is an Uzumaki, and she managed to learn how to use chakra on her own. Naruto questioned, Nan dezuka, Karin-chan? Naruto-kun, what's that dark chakra I can sense within you? Asked Karin. As Naruto and Karin began to strengthen their chakra, Karin began to notice that Naruto had a darker, more powerful chakra. This caused her eyes to widen. "This chakra is really dark. What is it?" As she turned to face the blonde, she thought. Jiraiya arched an eyebrow at the girl's terrified look. Could she? It's not possible. Even if she had sensory abilities at such a young age, they wouldn't be able to detect Naruto's Kyuubi no Kitsune. However, she is an Uzumaki, and she managed to learn how to use chakra on her own. Naruto questioned, Huh? Nan Dezuka, Karin, Chan? N. Naruto.kun, what's that dark chakra I can sense within you? Asked Karin. Naruto questioned, Huh? Dark chakra? What are you talking about? Both of the 4-year-olds turned to watch Jiraiya as she said, Karin, you mentioned that you could feel a dark chakra within Naruto. What did you mean by that? Well, ever since I can remember, I've had these strong sensory skills. I can even tell the exact amount of chakra someone has merely by looking at them, Karin replied. She possesses one of the innumerable Kekkei Genkei of the Uzumaki. She appears to have exceptional sensory abilities in this instance. I don't even believe Inoichi-san could determine someone's chakra level just by looking at them, Jiraiya thought. I can't quite explain it, but I sense a dark and cold chakra lying deep within Naruto.kun, Karin replied. Karin nodded in response to Naruto's question, a dark and cold chakra within me? The two children looked at Jiraiya as she said, I hoped it wouldn't have come to this, but it seems like I've got no choice. Naruto questioned, what do you mean, Jiraiya, sensei? Jiraiya continued by describing how Naruto's father, the Yondaime Hokage, had sealed the beast inside of him after the Kyuubi no Kitsune had attacked Konohagakure no Sato 4 years prior. Additionally, he informed the two about their shared membership in the Uzumaki clan. Nani? The Yondaime Hokage is my father? And he sealed the Kyuubi within me? Replied Naruto. Karin said, and I'm an Uzumaki. Given how young he was, Jiraiya had anticipated that Naruto would take it quite hard to learn that he had the Kyuubi inside of him and that his father had sealed the beast, but then the unexpected occurred. Jiraiya started to perspire when Naruto exclaimed, Yash! That's so cool! The boy turned to face Karin and asked, what do you think, Karin? Chan? Is it cool or what? I guess, Karin uttered. Before smiling, Jiraiya reflected, boy, that kid really has no idea about the life of a Jinchuriki. But if everything goes well, then that's a life he'll never have to experience. Naruto caught the Gamma Senin's attention by saying, oh, hey, Jiraiya, sensei? Jiraiya said, what is it, kid? Naruto eagerly inquired, could you teach me to control the Kyuubi's chakra? After a moment of confusion, Jiraiya asked, control the Kyuubi's chakra, before smiling, he said, all right, kid. But first I want the both of you to completely master Shunshin no Jutsu, as well as a couple of chakra control exercises I've got planned. Naruto said, as he sagged, clearly disappointed. Time. Skip. After 1 year Jiraiya had to reveal what was inside Naruto after Karin had been with them for a full year, but the boy handled it much better than the Sannin had anticipated. When they were in one of the many hot springs in the Land of Steam, Naruto once saw Jiraiya snooping around the women's bath that Karin was in. Additionally, he and Karin began referring to the man as Arrow Senin, after busting him. Kurama no Kyuubi. Take note that he was spying on the other women, not Karin. Additionally, Naruto and Karin had grown close over the course of the year and were now practically inseparable. Even though they weren't sharing a bed, they were now sleeping in the same room at an inn. Additionally, they always used the same tent when they went camping in the outdoors. Kurama no Kyuubi. However, for some reason, they continued to view one another as close friends. By having them perform 3 chakra control exercises, applying a leaf to their foreheads, climbing trees, and walking on water, Jiraiya was also able to help them improve their chakra control. Jiraiya was facing the two children as the 3 of them stood in a clearing in the middle of the forest. He looked down at the girl and then turned to face Naruto. All right, Karin, you've shown quite the talent with your chakra control, but you still need to work on your taijutsu. And you, Naruto. I think it's finally time for us to work on that Kyuubi chakra of yours, he said. Jiraiya started to perspire as Naruto pumped his fists into the air and yelled, Yosha! Then what are we waiting for, Arrow Senin? After that, the Sannin made a kage bunshin to accompany Karin as he and Naruto ventured deeper into the forest until they reached a smaller clearing. Alright, Naruto. Now, to start off, I want you to completely exhaust your normal chakra, leaving only Kyuubi's chakra left, Jiraiya replied. Naruto questioned, and how do I do that? Jiraiya grimaced because he hadn't considered how the child would deplete his chakra reserves because he didn't know any other techniques besides the Shunshin, which requires very little chakra to execute. If the child tried to do so, Naruto's reserves would end up being there all day. Jiraiya proposed, okay, scratch that. Then, how about we have a spar? A spar? Inquired Naruto. Yes, You know, like all those times you're playing with your girlfriend, Jiraiya replied. Hey, she's not my girlfriend, you sick perv, Naruto screamed, blushing profusely and pointing an accusing finger at Jiraiya. The Sannin muttered to himself, could have fooled me. Then he said, well, then, here I come, so prepare yourself. The battle was over in no time at all. Even though Jiraiya was clearly holding back, Naruto hadn't even been able to land a single blow, and the blonde was pushed back by the shockwaves from his punches and kicks alone. However, Jiraiya was standing over Naruto, who was now lying on the ground, panting heavily, indicating that they had ultimately succeeded in their goal. Alright. Now that you're completely exhausted, attempt to summon your chakra, Jiraiya replied. Naruto sat up and exclaimed, Yosh, before making a hand gesture. Jiraiya took a few steps back to be safe when tiny streams of red chakra suddenly began to flow up around the blonde. Jiraiya saw that Naruto's eyes had become slid as the streams of chakra disappeared. This must have been a minor side effect of using the Kyuubi's chakra. Jiraiya inquired, so, do you feel anything different? Naruto responded, no, not really. Jiraiya handed Naruto an apple and said, well, then. Here, try and crush this apple in your palm. Naruto followed Jiraiya's instructions, and the apple was crushed in a matter of seconds. Whoa, Naruto exclaimed, this is awesome, as he realized how much stronger he had become from that tiny amount of chakra. Although they worked on mastering control of the fox's chakra over the course of the following few weeks, Naruto was only able to access the small amount he had at the beginning of their training. However, after coming this far, that didn't mean he would simply give up. Even though he had reached the point where he could use that small portion of Kyuubi's chakra whenever he felt like it after 2 months of training, it was still all of the chakra at his disposal. As usual, Naruto was currently training to try to master the Biju's chakra, but he didn't appear to be making any headway. He had no idea, though, that something would occur this time that would permanently alter his life. As he tried to access the enormous reserves that were concealed deep within him, Naruto held his hands in a hand sign. However, he was abruptly flung a few feet back, so it didn't work. The fox appeared to be attempting to challenge him for control of his chakra. But instead of giving up, Naruto stood up and made the same hand gesture. As he tried to call forth the chakra once more, he thought, okay, you dumb fox, if you think I'm giving up on mastering your chakra, then you're wrong. At the moment, Karin was training with his clone once more, and Jiraiya was keeping watch over the child from the treetops. Looking down at his student, the Sannin grinned. The child looked a lot like his old man. They both had blonde, spiky hair, neither of them knew what give up meant, and they both had a thing for redheads. The same chakra that Naruto was attempting to access blew him back once more, but he got back up and tried again. But something or someone was watching him from deep within the blonde. The Kyuubi no Kitsune himself was there, and he had to admit that the boy's tenacity was admirable. In fact, he had only ever witnessed 3 individuals with that level of tenacity before. The Yondaime Hokage, the Rakudo Sennin, and the Shodai Hokage. The Kyuubi, however, didn't like that a human, much less a child, was in charge of his abilities. The Kyuubi grinned as he released a tremendous amount of chakra that would suffocate most people in a matter of seconds. Hey! Doesn't that brat know when to give up? Very well then, if that's the way you want it, let me help you a little, and see how you like it. The ground around the boy cracked from the sheer volume of red chakra that rushed out of his body as Naruto continued to try to draw from the fox's vast chakra reserves, and then... boom! Jiraiya yelled, Naruto! As he leapt to his feet and ran in the direction of the blonde. After hearing the explosion and sensing the enormous amounts of the Biju's chakra, Karin arrived shortly after. Jiraiya's and Karin's eyes widened as the explosion's smoke cleared. Karin said, Arrow, Sennin, what happened to him? As he looked at the unconscious boy, Jiraiya remarked, I don't know. Naruto's ears had abruptly disappeared and were replaced by fox ears that protruded from his hair on top of his head, along with fangs and claws. The most striking feature, though, was that the boy's back was covered in 9 tails foxtails. Naruto had become accustomed to the fox appendages after a year of receiving them. His 5 senses had all improved significantly, though, so it wasn't just his appearance that had changed. A previously unidentified dojutsu that they called Uzugen because it resembled the Uzumaki clan symbol had further strengthened his eyes. Since Naruto and Karin would shortly begin their studies at the Ninja Academy, they had now arrived in Konoha. Naturally, though, they would have to first meet Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage. As the 3 of them stood in front of the gates, Jiraiya remarked, well, here we are. Konohagakure no Sato. As they arrived in the village, Naruto exclaimed, wow, it's huge. Karin glanced at Jiraiya as she finished her sentence and remarked, Yeah, I've seen towns smaller than this place. You sure it's really a village? The Sannin remarked, quite impressive, isn't it? A lot of people turned to look at them as they passed through the village, primarily due to Naruto's 9 tails. They soon reached the Hokage Tower and proceeded to walk until they came to the Hokage's office, where they went. As he looked up from his paperwork to see the three, Hiruzen said, "Glad to see you back, Jiraiya." Karin laughed when Naruto said, "You're the Hokage? You don't look that strong to me." She remarked, "Got that right, Naruto-kun." Hiruzen said, "Well, hello again, Naruto-kun. I haven't seen you since you were a baby." He then turned to face Karin, saying, "And you must be Karin." Looking back at Jiraiya, he asked, "You mentioned that there was something you couldn't tell me in your reports, so tell me, what was it?" Hiruzen looked down at the blonde and saw the fox. Like appendages, as Jiraiya explained, Naruto seems to have awakened his Kekkei Genkai, though the interference of the Kyuubi's chakra seems to have given him some physical changes. He turned to face his former student and said, "I see. So, what is this Kekkei Genkai?" "Well, as you know, there are hardly ever two Uzumaki with the same Kekkei Genkai, which is why they are so unique. However, amongst the Uzumaki, there are times when someone appears with two Kekkei Genkai. Both Naruto and Karin are such examples." Jiraiya continued. Jiraiya nodded in response to Hiruzen's question. "Both of them?" "Naruto has a dojutsu and the ability to sense emotions. And Karin has extremely strong sensory skills and the ability to fully heal an injured person who's sucking on her chakra, however, doing so leaves a permanent bite mark." Jiraiya clarified. Hiruzen looked down at the two kids and said, "So, what do you two think of the village so far? So she should refrain from using that second Kekkei Genkai of hers as much as possible, huh?" Naruto exclaimed, "It's awesome. I can't wait to see more of it, Datbeo." Karin smiled and said, "Me neither." Hiruzen inquired, "Do any of you have any dreams?" "I aspire to be Hokage like my dad, Datbeo," cried Naruto. "Your father?" Hiruzen asked, then turned to face Jiraiya and exclaimed, "Jiraiya." Jiraiya said, "Look, I can explain," and then began to explain. Rewind. Jiraiya was in the middle of sharing his knowledge of the Kyuubi attack with Naruto and Karin. And then the Kyuubi was teleported away, and I don't know the specifics, but that's when your father, Karin, interrupted him before he could process what he had just said. She inquired, "His father? Oh, fuck, Sensei is going to kill me for my mistake." Tears streamed down Jiraiya's face from his eyes as he cried in his head. The end of the flashback. Hiruzen said, "So, it just slipped?" Jiraiya remarked, "Pretty much, yeah," while Karin and Naruto giggled in the background. Before turning to face Naruto and Karin, Hiruzen sighed deeply and said, "Well, it's too late now, I guess. Anyway, welcome to Konoha, Naruto-kun and Karin-chan." Together, Naruto and Karin said, "Thanks." Then there was a knock on the door. A boy with black hair and Anbu armor, who couldn't be older than 6 years, entered after Hiruzen said, "Come in." The boy said, "You summoned me, Hokage Sama." Before turning to face Naruto and Karin, Hiruzen remarked, "Ah, yes. I have assigned this man to watch over you. His name is Uchiha Itachi." Itachi looked at them and said, "So are these the ones? They seem to be about Sasuke's age." "Yes. The boy is Uzumaki Naruto, and the girl is Uzumaki Karin," Hiruzen replied. "Don't you think he's a little young?" Jiraiya asked, glancing first at Itachi and then at Hiruzen. "If I'm not mistaken, that boy is." "He may be young, but he's already made it into Anbu," Hiruzen replied. Not long after Itachi, Naruto, and Karin strolled through the village and Itachi said, "Since your new home won't be ready till next week, I've asked my father if it'd be okay for you to stay at the Uchiha compound till then." Karin inquired, "Was it all right with him?" "It took some convincing, but my mother was in the end able to talk him into agreeing," Itachi stated. "She did? Why?" inquired Naruto. "Don't know, she was rather indifferent on the matter until she learned your names. Yours in particular, Naruto-kun," Itachi replied. Compound Uchiha. They arrived at the Uchiha compound shortly after and proceeded through the streets until they came to a house that Naruto and Karin believed to be Itachi's. Itachi opened the door and said, "I'm home." He then went inside and took off his sandals, and Naruto and Karin did the same. Just before a boy who appeared to be a younger Itachi arrived, a voice exclaimed, "Ni-san." The boy stopped running upon seeing Naruto and Karin. Itachi looked down at Naruto and Karin and said, "Hello, Sasuke. I want you to meet Naruto and Karin. They're new to Konoha, so Hokage Sama told me to look after them, and they'll be staying with us till their new home will be ready. Naruto-kun, Karin-chan, This is, but Sasuke interrupted. The name's Uchiha Sasuke. Welcome to Konoha, he responded. Naruto said, hello. Before Sasuke turned to face his brother, Karin said, nice to meet you. But Ni-san, you promised me that we could play ninja when you came back, Sasuke replied. Then Itachi waved his hand in a come here gesture to Sasuke, with his palm facing the floor rather than the ceiling, and grinned. Then, as Sasuke ran in his direction, he used his finger to poke the younger Uchiha in the forehead. Before passing his brother, he said, sorry Sasuke, maybe next time. Sasuke frowned and placed his hand on the spot on his forehead where Itachi had poked him. Naruto said, hey, we'll play with you. Sasuke and Karin both turned to face him, and then a smile appeared on Sasuke's face. They were unaware that Itachi was grinning while leaning against the wall directly to the left of the entrance hall door. It appears that Sasuke will at last make friends outside of the clan who are also his own age, he thought. Soon after, Sasuke was frantically searching the Uchiha compound for Karin and Naruto. After pausing to survey the area, he noticed two red fox-like ears protruding from behind a crate. Then, carrying two wooden shuriken, the young Uchiha smirked and leapt into the air, shouting, I found you. He then threw the shuriken and struck Naruto, who landed on his back with a foxy grin on his face. He exclaimed, you got me, as Sasuke grinned and then turned to search for Karin. He asked aloud, now, where can the other one be? Sasuke looked up and threw another wooden shuriken up just before Karin fell, landing on her face. Naruto said, you shouldn't be too confident that you found me. Karin-chan is gonna be a lot trickier to find. Karin shouted at Sasuke, hey, I could have been seriously injured ya know. While Naruto scratched the back of his head and laughed. Sasuke held his hands defensively in front of him and uttered, gomen nasai. Karin shouted, and you, stop laughing, and gestured to Naruto. When the three turned to face the voice's origin, they saw Itachi approaching them and saying, dinner's ready, so mom told me to come and get you. Sasuke, Naruto.kun, Karin-chan. Dining room at Uchiha head's residence around the dinner table, Naruto, Karin, Sasuke, Itachi, and the parents of Sasuke and Itachi, Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Makoto, were consuming the food. So Naruto.kun and Karin-chan, is it true that you've been growing up under the tutelage of Jiraiya-sama? Makoto inquired. With food in his mouth, Naruto said, yes, it is. Makoto laughed, and Karin gave him a slap on the head. After shouting at him, use some manners, Naruto.kun. She turned to face Makoto and Fugaku and bowed, I'm sorry. Makoto said, oh, it's all right, and waved it away. Asking, Jiraiya? Sasuke said. Itachi clarified, one of the legendary Sannin. Before turning to face Naruto and Karin, Sasuke remarked, wow, really? You were trained by someone like that? Then you must have learned some awesome techniques? Naruto sighed and said, unfortunately, no, all he ever taught us were the basics. Nothing really useful. Sasuke frowned in disappointment. Makoto said, drawing attention from Sasuke, Karin, and Naruto, I wouldn't be so sure of that. Karin said, what do you mean? Even the basics can be very dangerous if used properly. You should meet Shisui.kun sometime. In the Third Great Ninja War he became feared due to his great talent with the Shunshin no Jutsu. Makoto replied. That's right. And he's also the first and only Uchiha ever to become famous thanks to a technique that doesn't have anything to do with the Sharingan at all, Itachi responded. The Sharingan? Inquired Naruto. Makoto stated, it's a dojutsu exclusive to the Uchiha clan. Sasuke gasped when Naruto said, a dojutsu? You mean like my Uzugan? Makoto and Itachi turned to face Naruto, neither of whom had anticipated this. Fugaku even squinted an eye in Naruto's direction, displaying his first indication of interest in the current discussion. You've got a dojutsu? What kind of powers do your eyes have? Asked Sasuke. I'm able to see chakra. Each person's got a different color, said Naruto. Sasuke questioned, really? Then what's the color of my chakra? The first thing Fugaku said after the dinner began was, yes, I think we would all be interested in seeing this dojutsu of yours. Naruto closed his eyes after saying, okay. When he opened them again, his irises were red and whirlpool patterned, exactly like the Uzumaki clan's emblem. Your chakra is a vivid blue hue, but, Naruto remarked, glancing at Sasuke. But, inquired Sasuke. Itachi's eyes briefly widened as Naruto remarked, but you've got a small orange spot in your brain. Makoto asked, and what color is my chakra? which made Naruto turn to face her. Before turning to face Fugaku, Naruto remarked, "Yours is a deeper blue than Sasuke's. And yours is gray." Naruto then turned to face Itachi, saying, "Itachi-san, your chakra on the other hand is orange." Karin said, "What about me, Naruto-kun?" And Naruto turned to face her. "Yours is the same red as your hair just like always," said Naruto. Following this, they ate until they were finished, at which point Naruto, Sasuke, and Karin thanked him for the food and went to Sasuke's room, where they spent the remainder of the evening chatting. Makoto happened to walk by the room and overheard them talking about Naruto's parents when the conversation finally got to the subject of who they were. Makoto walked into the dining room and remarked, "Looks like I was right." Fugaku sat on a chair and read the newspaper, asking, "About what?" Fugaku looked up from the newspaper when Makoto said, "About Naruto-kun being Kushi-chan's son, of course." "You say that Kushina's son? Then he must be the," Fugaku uttered. "The Kyuubi Jinchuriki, right? Well, I don't care what he's got inside of him as long as he's Sasuke's friend," Makoto replied. "He and that girl will start the academy tomorrow, right? So let's hope that they end up in Sasuke's class," Fugaku replied. The following day Naruto and Karin would have to share the guest room that Makoto had set up for them because they only had one. Naturally, this was not an issue because Naruto and Karin had already shared a room for years and would have done so again this time. Until Karin jumped on him and woke him up, Naruto was still asleep in the bed and was unaware that she was approaching him. Then, as he turned around, Naruto pushed her away from him, but he blushed when he saw that he was touching the right side of her chest. To make things worse, she was only wearing her white underwear. Karin winked at him and said, "What, if you wanted to touch me so badly, you could have just asked." Naruto stammered, "Karin-chan, just before someone knocked on the door. Makoto's voice said, "Naruto-kun, Karin-chan, breakfast is ready." Soon after, Naruto and Karin, who were now completely dressed, were seated at the dining room table with Sasuke. Makoto was doing the dishes at the moment, and both Itachi and Fugaku had already left for work. The three kids were prepared to head to the academy after eating breakfast, and fortunately for Naruto and Karin, Makoto had purchased backpacks for them both. Naruto stood up and remarked, "I guess we should be leaving." Makoto placed 3 bento boxes on the table, one for each of them, and said, "Just hold up a sec, you three." Naruto inquired, "What are those?" "Your lunches of course. You didn't think you were going to go the whole day without eating, did you?" Makoto replied. Before packing the bento into his backpack and leaving the house with Sasuke and Karin to run to the academy, Naruto said, "Thanks." However, none of them were aware that someone was observing them from the house's corner. "So that's the one that Itachi spoke of. The one who could see through the Kodo Amatsukami. Uzumaki Naruto, in time, you can become strong enough to hold the fate of the world in your hand," the individual replied. When Funeno Daikoku, their Chunin instructor, arrived and took his seat at the desk in front of the blackboard, every student in the class was present. He said, "Good morning, to you all." The students all uttered the same phrase, "Good morning." Before turning to face the door, Daikoku said, "We have some new students joining us today. You may come in, now." Then, as Naruto and Karin entered through the open door, Sasuke grinned at the thought of them being in his class. Then the two paused and looked around the classroom. "Now, then. Care to introduce yourselves to the rest of the class?" Daikoku responded. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the man who will become the next Hokage, Datbeo," said Naruto. Karin added, "And I'm Uzumaki Karin." Daikoku turned to the two Uzumaki and said, "You may go and find yourselves somewhere to sit. Naruto and Karin here are new to the village, so I would like you all to give them a warm welcome." After scanning the classroom, Naruto and Karin noticed 2 vacant seats next to Sasuke, who was seated in the far right corner at the rear of the room. Then, while the other students stared at them, or rather, at Naruto's fox-like limbs, they ran up towards Sasuke. "What's wrong with that man? He's wearing a really strange costume," a boy with spiky brown hair remarked. Naruto sat down next to the raven head and Karin sat down next to him once more. "Hey, Sasuke. Looks like we're in the same class." Sasuke replied, "Yeah. I was hoping we'd be." "Are those two familiar with Sasuke-kun?" were the concurrent thoughts of a blonde girl and a pink-haired girl seated next to each other. The class then began, but as Naruto and Karin soon discovered, Daikoku was merely imparting knowledge that they already possessed, so Naruto fell asleep very quickly. The school bell finally rang, signaling recess, and he was awakened. Karin looked at him and asked, "Slept well?" Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, heh heh, yeah. So, Naruto, was it? Asked Naruto, Karin, and Sasuke as they turned to face the boy with the spiky brown hair who had spoken. Yes, and you're, inquired Naruto. The boy, who was now identified as Kiba, grabbed Naruto's right ear and tried to rip it off, saying, the name's Kiba, Inuzuka Kiba. And I was wondering what the point of this ridiculous costume was. Naruto exclaimed, Itai, 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 before Kiba stumbled back and noticed that he was holding just 3 red hairs. He exclaimed, it's real. Naruto rubbed his sore ear and remarked, well, of course it's real. And that really hurt, ya know. Datbeo. Kiba stepped back and said, WH. What are you? But Karin spoke up before Naruto could respond. She appeared to have developed devil horns and sharp teeth, and she declared, he's an evil demon who eats bad children for lunch. Then, with her devil horns still in place, Karin laughed as Kiba let out a girlish scream and fled. Looking at them, Sasuke said, seriously, though, what's with those ears? I'm not exactly sure. They, along with the tails, appeared during an accident while training. Though arrow. Sennin believes it's got something to do with the Kyuubi inside me. Naruto clarified. According to Sasuke, the Kyuubi. Yeah, haven't you heard of it? It's this humongous fox. Like monster that attacked the village 6 years ago. Naruto replied. Of course I've heard of it, but I thought that it was killed. Sasuke replied. No, it can't be killed, so the Yondaime sealed it inside me instead. Naruto replied. Naruto was about to respond when Sasuke asked, why you? But Karin covered his mouth with her hand. Her voice was nervous as she said, because Naruto-kun was the only one around. Really? Karin leaned into Naruto's ear, and Sasuke, not quite convinced, asked. She whispered, you promised Arrow Sennin that you wouldn't tell anyone who your parents were, remember? Sasuke tilted his head in bewilderment as Naruto whispered, oh, yeah. Heh heh. I forgot. Karin then took her hand away from his mouth and sat back down in her chair. Then, as classes resumed, Daikoku returned to the classroom. Everyone left the classroom when the bell eventually rang once more, signaling that lunchtime had arrived. While some remained inside, others went out into the courtyard. In the training hall, Karin had met 2 girls, a blonde named Yamanaka Ino and a pinkette named Haruno Sakura, with whom she soon became friends. Naruto and Sasuke were seated at the bottom of the staircase. Sakura exclaimed, you're living with Sasuke-kun? Karin nodded. Yeah, but only until our new home is ready sometime next week, Karin replied. You're lucky, Sakura sighed as she cast her gaze to the floor. Huh? Karin gave her a perplexed look. I think she means that you're lucky that you're so close to Sasuke-kun, Ino replied. After noticing a hint of jealousy in Sakura's eyes, Karin asked, and why's that? Oh, I get it. You want to get under Sasuke's pants, don't you? Sakura's head turned as red as a tomato, and it seemed like steam was leaking out of her ears. After that, the redhead put her hand on Sakura's shoulder and said, look, if you like him so much, you should try asking him out. Who knows, he might say, yes. Sasuke and Naruto in the training hall. Naruto and Sasuke sat at the foot of the stairs, chatting and eating their lunches. Whoa, Sasuke. Your mom's an awesome cook, Datbeo, said Naruto. Sasuke replied, yeah, I know, right? Hey, Naruto-kun. Sasuke. Naruto and Sasuke turned to face the voice and saw Sakura, Ino, and Karin approaching. As the 3 girls approached and Karin turned to face Sasuke, Naruto said, Karin-chan? While said pinkette was blushing and only looked down at the ground, Karin pushed Sakura forward and said, Sasuke, Sakura here has something she wants to ask you. SS Sasuke. K.kun, W. Would why? Why.u, she began, twitching her fingers and flushed. Karin said, come on, ask him already. Well, if it isn't Uchiha Duck. But along with his fangirls. As everyone turned to face the voice's origin, they saw 3 children who didn't appear to be older than a year. The child who had spoken was the one with the light, brown, upward, pointing spiky hair. He was dressed in black pants and a red shirt with the Senju clan emblem on the back. The boy to his right had black hair and spikes. He was dressed in black pants and a black shirt with a clan symbol on the back that none of them could identify. 5 arrows protruded from the circle's center, where a smaller circle was located. The kanji for fire, wind, lightning, earth, and water were at the tips of each arrow. Each kanji was colored according to its element. Additionally, the yin, Yang's symbol was located in the center circle. A girl with long red hair that reached her butt was the third and last of the three. She was dressed in red pants and a red shirt with the Uzumaki clan emblem on the back. Upon glancing at Naruto and Karin, the previous speaker said, "So you're the new students, huh? Well, as long as you remember that I'm the boss around here." Naruto stood up and exclaimed, "Huh? Like you could be the boss of anything." "Naruto, stop. What are you thinking?" replied Ino. "That guy insulted my friend, and I won't stand for it," said Naruto. The apparent leader of the three said, "Hey, then come at me if you dare." Naruto was about to charge at the man when the bell rang, but he said, "With pleasure." Sakura said, "Ah, the school bell." As they passed Naruto and the others and ascended the stairs to their classroom, the trio's leader exclaimed, "Ha, saved by the clock." Karin looked up at the three and said, "Who is that jerk, anyway?" As she, Naruto, and Karin gazed up at them angrily, Ino remarked, "Senju Hashi. He believes he owns this place just because he's of the Senju clan and is named after the Shodai." Time. Skip. Roughly a week after a week, Naruto and Karin finally got to see their new house, and it would be an understatement to say that they were taken aback when Itachi took them and Sasuke there. They were given a whole clan compound that had just been constructed specifically to serve as the new Uzumaki clan compound. "Whoa! The place is huge, Datbayo!" Naruto cried out as they arrived at the compound's outer gate. "Well, it was designed to be the home of an entire clan," Itachi replied. Karin questioned, "Then why give it to us? This is the Uzumaki clan compound, your compound," a new voice said, and as everyone turned to face it, someone emerged from behind one of the compound's houses. "And you're?" inquired Naruto. "Sasuke, Naruto-kun, and Karin. Chan, meet my best friend and mentor, Uchiha Shisui," Itachi replied. Karin inquired, "That's Uchiha Shisui?" Shisui pointed to Naruto and said, "It's nice to meet you. Itachi has told me a lot about you, especially you, Naruto-kun. Anyway, shall we get going? I'm guessing you want to see what your new home looks like on the inside as well." After entering the compound through the gates, they proceeded to inspect each of the houses until they came to one that was marginally larger than the others. When they arrived at the master bedroom, they discovered that there was only one bed, despite Naruto's guess that he and Karin would live there. "So if there's only one bed, does that mean that me and Karin, Chan will have to share?" Naruto responded. With a drop of perspiration, Shisui remarked, "Well, this room was only really meant for just you. Me and Karin, Chan always sleep in the same room," said Naruto. "Then I suppose that you'll have to share the same bed as well," Shisui replied. Everyone started to perspire when Karin, who was flushed, said, but I'm not ready to be a mother yet. Besides, you can't get pregnant at such a young age, anyway," Shisui thought after saying, "I didn't say that you should do anything else than sharing the bed." With a dark cloud hanging over her head, Karin looked down at the floor with a look of disappointment as Naruto said, Karin. Chan, we're not gonna be having sex, you know." That has disappointed her. As he gazed at her, Sasuke pondered. After 6 months it didn't take Naruto long to get out from under Karin so he could use the restroom, but when he woke up, she had her arm across his chest and her leg over both of his. About 6 months had passed since they arrived in Konoha, and they had already made a few friends at the academy. Of course, they lived with Uchiha Sasuke for the first week, followed by Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura, whom Karin had made friends with right away. Afterwards, they became friends with Nara Shikamaru and Akamichi Choji. In addition, Inuzuka Kiba and Hyuga Hinata both developed romantic feelings for Karin, much to Naruto's chagrin, though the latter made an effort to conceal them. When Naruto returned to the bedroom to change after finishing the bathroom, he discovered that Karin had already woken up and had most likely gone to prepare breakfast. After dressing, he went downstairs. They left after breakfast, locked the door, and made their way to the academy. They then proceeded to the classroom, where Naruto approached Sasuke and Karin approached Ino and Sakura to speak with them. "Yo, Sasuke!" and exclaimed he. As Naruto approached him and they smacked fists, Sasuke exclaimed, "Naruto." As they took their seats, Naruto inquired, "So how's Itachi-san doing? I haven't seen him in a while." "He's away on some mission and should hopefully be back by tomorrow," Sasuke replied. Karin approached with a paper form and said, "Hey, Naruto-kun, look." Naruto and Sasuke gazed at her and asked, "What is it?" "Ino. Chan has invited every girl in class to a sleep over at her house tonight," Karin disclosed. "Will you be going?" inquired Naruto. Karin sat down in her chair and said, "Just don't get lonely now that you'll be all alone in bed," All right? After shouting at him, well, of course I'll be going. Daikoku entered the classroom just as Naruto was about to reply, and all discussion ceased as everyone took their seats. Daikoku said, "Good morning, class." The majority of the class said, "Good morning." All of you will go to the sparring ring outside where you'll be picked to fight each other in 1-on-1 matches. Alright then, follow me. Daikoku said, and everyone followed him as he left. Now then, today we will be assessing your abilities in battle. When they arrived at the sparring ring, they formed a circle and stood there while Daikoku described their plan. Before looking down at a piece of paper he was holding, Daikoku said, "Now I'll call out the names of 2 of you, and the ones that are named will be fighting each other inside this ring. The first one to step outside the ring or be defeated loses." He then called out the first 2 names. First match will be Uzumaki Naruto vs Uchiha Sasuke. This caused the eyes of Naruto, Sasuke, and Karin to widen. As Naruto and Sasuke stood inside the ring, Sasuke's fangirls cheered, "Sasuke-kun." As he demonstrated the sparring sign, which was essentially half of a Hitsuji or Tora sign, Daikoku said, "First, before you begin, you must show each other the sparring sign. And after the match is over, show the same sign, only overlap them with each other similar to a hand shake." The signs were then formed by Naruto and Sasuke raising their right hands. Daikoku said, "You may begin." The 2 then assumed their respective combat positions. Neither moved. Sasuke charged at Naruto without warning, suggesting that he had not learned Naruto's lesson to observe an opponent's movements before attacking. The Uchiha tried to strike Naruto, but the blonde deflected the blow past his head with his hand before kneeing Sasuke in the stomach, which caused the Raven head to collapse, and then elbowing Naruto in the chin, which caused the Uzumaki to take a small step back. His fangirls cheered even louder when Sasuke punched Naruto in the stomach and then gave the blonde an uppercut to the jaw. Then, in retaliation, Naruto gave the Uchiha a punch to the face that was powerful enough to knock him to the ground and head butted him, which made his fangirls laugh at him. Naruto smirked and looked down at Sasuke, who grinned back at him before leaping forward to confront him. "That all you've got?" Naruto asked. Sitting on a building's roof, Jiraiya was using a telescope to observe Hashi's friend from Uzumaki while recalling a discussion he had had with Hiruzen. Rewind, then he said, "And Uzumaki? Yes, her full name is Uzumaki Rika. We found her unconscious outside the village gates about a year ago. Apparently, she and her parents had tried to reach Konoha in an attempt to escape someone that had been following them," Hiruzen replied. The end of the flashback recalling the mission Hiruzen had assigned him, Jiraiya took the telescope away from his eyes. "Jiraiya, I want you to watch over the girl." Then he let out a sigh. Although keeping watch over a girl was alright, he only wished she had been much older. Alongside Naruto, when Naruto woke up that morning without Karin by his side, he initially wondered where she was. However, he later recalled that she was at Ino's house for a sleepover, so he would have to prepare breakfast on his own. Before he left the house after eating, he picked up the shuriken holster that the academy instructor had given him to practice with. He didn't realize he was being followed as he was walking down the deserted streets. When he saw a shadow approaching, he turned to see who it was, only to be struck so severely in the head that he lost consciousness. The academy, together with Ino and Sakura, Karin entered the academy grounds, completely unaware of what had just transpired with Naruto. Soon after, everyone had gathered in the classroom and taken their seats when Daikoku entered. However, he noticed that someone was still missing when he glanced around the classroom. Everyone looked around when he asked, "Where's Naruto?" But the blonde Jinchuriki was nowhere to be seen, so Daikoku turned to face Karin and asked, "Karin, do you know where he is?" "No, I was asleep. Over at Ino-chan's place, and I haven't seen him today," Karin replied. He asked the young Uchiha, "What about you, Sasuke?" Sasuke responded, "No, I haven't seen him today either." Before class began, Daikoku stated, "Well, we need to start class whether he's here or not. Hopefully he's just slept." Quite quietly, Ino said, "It's not like him to be late. You think something happened to him?" Afterwards, Karin, Sasuke, Ino, Sakura, Shikamaru, and Choji decided to sneak out of school to find Naruto because she was concerned that he hadn't arrived when the bell rang to signal recess. Karin focused on trying to locate the blonde's chakra, which didn't take long, and made the Hitsuji hand sign while they were in the training hall. "I found him. He's at training field 3, but," she replied. "But what?" inquired Shikamaru. "I'm not sensing any chakra activity from him." "Is that bad?" inquired Sakura. "If he doesn't have any chakra activity, it could only mean 2 things. He's either sleeping or he's dead," said Shikamaru. Shoji feared the worst and said, "You don't really think that?" "Don't worry, he's not dead. If he was, I wouldn't be able to sense him at all as he wouldn't have any chakra for me to sense," Karin replied. "But why would he be sleeping in one of the training fields, anyway? I thought only ninja were allowed there," Ino pondered. "I don't know, but I can sense 3 others there as well. 2 with Chunin level chakra and 1 with Jonin level chakra," Karin replied. Shikamaru questioned, could it be that they attacked him because of a grudge? Sakura questioned, but why would someone have a grudge against Naruto? Not Naruto, but what's inside him? Remember, the Kyuubi attacked the village just over 7 years ago, and many lost their loved ones and family members during the attack, so it makes sense that someone would hold a grudge. Shikamaru continued. Kurama no Kyuubi. Naruto shared the fox with all of his friends. At any rate, Naruto's in trouble, so we've got to save him, Sasuke replied. But what can we do against 2 Chunin and 1 Jonin? Ino responded. Shoji stated, Ino's right, we wouldn't stand a chance. But we can't just leave them alone, Naruto could be in trouble, Sakura replied. Karin interrupted Shikamaru as he began, yes, but we'll need a plan before. She turned around and began to run, saying, enough, I'm going. Ah, Karin. Chan, exclaimed Sakura. Before following the redhead, Sasuke remarked, I'll go with her, you guys see if you can find someone that can help us. Shikamaru called out to them, ah, wait, but they were already too far away to hear him. What now? Inquired Sakura. Before the 4 of them began to run, Shikamaru stated, we need to go and find someone that can take down 2 Chunin and 1 Jonin by himself and bring him to Training Field 3 to save Naruto. Meanwhile, Hashi saw Karin and Sasuke rush out of the training hall while he was outside heading back to the class. Where are they heading? Before he heard Shikamaru's words, he pondered. Field 3 of training. As they gazed down on an unconscious Naruto who had been roped to a stump, there were, in fact, 3 people present. One of them, a Yamanaka if his hair was any indication, said, just look at his appearance, he's got to be the Kyuubi in human skin. Another, who appeared to be the leader of the 3, said, you're right, then you know what we should do with him, right? As he approached Naruto and withdrew a kunai. The third one exclaimed, why are we doing this? He's just a kid. Just a kid? He's the goddamned Kyuubi. You want to get revenge for your brother's death, don't you? The Yamanaka responded. According to the leader, who was licking the kunai's blade, now, little boy, time for you to feel our wrath. Gate of Konoha. The 2 gate guards approached them to inquire where they were going, but the 2 kids simply ran and patted them as Karin and Sasuke sprinted as fast as they could to the gate. Sasuke looked over his shoulder and yelled at them, sorry, but we don't have any time to explain, instead. Katetsu questioned one of them, wasn't it Itachi's brother? Azumo answered, yeah, you're right, the other one. With the others, including Shikamaru in search of someone who could assist them, the 4 children ran through the village's streets. Sakura said, why don't we go and get Hokage, Sama? I heard my father say earlier that there would be a council meeting today, so Hokage Sama will be busy, Shikamaru replied. We also cannot go and ask our fathers because all clan heads are members of the council, Ino scowled. Whoever's behind this must have known that there would be a council meeting today so that they could attack Naruto without catching Hokage Sama's attention, Shikamaru said prior to continuing. And to make matters worse, from Naruto's appearance and age, anyone Chunin and above should be able to put 2 and 2 together and figure out that he's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. However, why would that be an issue? Sakura inquired. Do you recall what I said before? The statement, the Kyuubi attacked the village 7 years ago, indicates that a large number of people perished in the attack, and the surviving friends and family of those who perished would continue to despise the fox for its actions. However, their animosity would shift from the fox to Naruto once they discovered that he was inside of him, Shikamaru clarified. Shikamaru, whoa, Ino remarked, you're much smarter than you look. The 4 kept running until they abruptly collided with something, or rather, someone, because they had failed to pay attention to their surroundings. They fell to their backs, grunting, Itai. Hey, why are you all in this place? As they looked up and saw who it was, they smiled at the person they had collided with. The academy as their teacher, Amino Iruka, explained to them the inner workings of chakra. Hashi's female friend, Uzumaki Rika, sighed in boredom. Before turning to face her raven-haired friend who was seated just across from her in an empty seat between them, she thought, this is so boring. She looked down at the empty seat between them and said, speaking of Hashi-kun, where is he? I don't understand how that guy can follow everything Iruka. Sensei's saying while staring out at who knows what. Field 3 of training. The three shinobis leader threw the kunai at Naruto, but he dropped it as a rock struck his hand, and the three of them turned to face the spot where the rock had been thrown. Who's that? Before they saw a child kneeling on a tree branch with a shuriken in his right hand, the Yamanaka shouted. You are what kind of ninja to attack a defenseless child? The child, Hashi remarked. And, brat, who are you supposed to be? The Jonin inquired. Hold on, I recognize you. You are Senju Hashi, an academy bully who thinks he is in charge of the students. Why are you here? The Yamanaka inquired. A boss won't allow one of his subordinates to be killed, Hashi remarked, echoing your statement that, I consider myself to be the boss of the students. As the Jonin put it, that's strange, coming from a bully. I might be a bully, but at least I'm not a coward who would resort to kill a child, Hashi replied. What was that? Yamanaka shouted. Hashi said, you heard me, you're all cowards. Oh, why you? The Yamanaka said, reaching for a kunai before the Jonin stopped him. Before turning to face Hashi, he interrupted, saying, hold it. You're only saying that because you don't know what this boy is. Hashi said, then enlighten me, Street Konoha. As fast as their feet would carry them, Itachi, Shikamaru, Shoji, Ino, and Sakura ran toward the village gates. At least that's how it was for the four children. Itachi had to hold back to avoid running away. You're implying that Sasuke and Karin Chan have already chased Naruto-kun to the training field and that he's probably in trouble? Itachi inquired. And Shikamaru replied, yeah, that's right. Itachi remarked, then there's no time to lose. He then accelerated, putting more distance between himself and the 7-year-olds. Field 3 of training. The Jonin had just finished telling Hashi about the Kyuubi inside Naruto when Sasuke and Karin arrived at the edge of the training field. Karin pointed to Hashi and said, hey, Sasuke, look, isn't that Hashi? Sasuke replied, yeah, you're right. When Hashi opened his eyes after processing the information, the Jonin grinned and said, and there you have it. I don't know Naruto that well, so maybe he is this monster that you claim him to be, I just don't know, or maybe he's completely innocent, I don't know that either. He said, shocking them by saying, you guys sicken me. However, I am aware that he is not at all like what you portray. Based on my observations, he is a diligent, resolute, and most importantly, a pretty good guy. The three ninja immediately jumped out of the way to avoid the nearly 100 kunai that were shooting towards them from the treetops after he threw the shuriken into the bushes. Before coming here, he set up traps. What? Inquired the other Chunin. No, Hashi remarked, it just so happens that a friend of mine always comes here to train. Anyway, before his irises abruptly began spinning into the Sharingan and he made a series of hand signals, the Jonin said, if you try to stop us, we'll just have to kill you. Kaden. Gukakyo no Jutsu. Hashi was about to be hit by the fireball when a black blur appeared, lifted him up, and placed him down next to Sasuke and Karin, revealing himself as Itachi. Ni-san. Sasuke cried out. Before leaving the tree line, Itachi remarked, I'll handle it from here. A Yamanaka, a Sarutobi, and a Uchiha, he thought, looking at the three. The Uchiha thought, that's with a start. And who do you think you are? The Uchiha wove in a series of hand signals before Itachi could respond to the Yamanaka's question. Kaden. Jutsu no Gukakyo. Itachi simply raised his right hand in front of his face and made a series of one-handed hand gestures as the ball of fire was directed at him. Kaden. Jutsu no Gukakyo. He then effortlessly gained the upper hand by launching a ball of fire twice as large as the other Uchihas. Hey, you. Assist as well, the Sarutobi was shouted at by the Yamanaka. All right. Before making a string of hand signals, he uttered, Kaden. Ryuka no Jutsu. The young Uchiha was then struck by a ball of flames that resembled a dragon's head, but it instantly changed into a murder of crows. The Yamanaka pondered, a cage bunshin. Then where's the real one? Before identifying the person he believed to be Itachi. He made a few signs before creating the symbol of his clan's distinctive method, Ninpo. Shintenshin. After entering his target's body, his body went limp, but he was surprised to discover that he was holding a kunai. Upon looking down, he discovered that it was the body of his friend from Uchiha, who had unknowingly been caught in a genjutsu. He turned to face the voice's origin and saw Itachi standing atop a tree. Kaden. Gukaryuenden no Jutsu. Then, before he could even react, a massive ball of flames shaped like a Chinese dragon was launched in his direction. Itachi saw what he thought was smoke covering the training field, but upon closer examination, he saw that it was actually steam, which the Yamanaka must have blocked with a water jutsu. Itachi swiftly leapt down into the steam to avoid the kunai, but as he landed, the other Uchiha tried to punch him, using the Sharingan to see his chakra through the steam. Then, a flurry of kunai flew towards him, and based on their direction, the Yamanaka was back in his own body. The steam cleared to show that Itachi was standing in the center of the training field, the Uchiha Jonin lying unconscious after Itachi blocked the move, then delivered a knee to the Jonin's gut and a swift chop to the back of the man's neck, rendering him unconscious. Whoa! Itachi-san is incredible. Just as Shikamaru and the others arrived, Karin yelled. As they all paused to catch their breath, Ino remarked, "Finally made it." "Hey, what brings him here?" Being the first to notice Hashi, Shoji inquired. The others scowled as Hashi sighed, "I just happened to hear your little conversation earlier and decided that something like this would be too much for weaklings like you to handle. So why are you with us here rather than assisting Itachi-san?" Karin questioned mockingly. "Because he can obviously handle himself, duh," Hashi replied. After that, Itachi searched the area for the other two, but while he was searching, he saw that Naruto was no longer bound to the stump because the rope was slackly wrapped around it. "Aid!" A recognizable voice called out, and he turned to see the Yamanaka clutching a fully awake Naruto at the boy's neck with the tip of a kunai, while the Sarutobi stood beside him, looking somewhat confused. "Remain away or I'll cut the child's throat," said the Yamanaka. Naruto-kun. The others followed Karin as she ran out into the training field and yelled. "Hey, hold on a minute." Hashi shouted after them, grunted in annoyance, and then ran after them as well. The Yamanaka turned to the Sarutobi and yelled, "Now do it," after saying, "Looks like we've got a bigger audience now." The Sarutobi flinched as the Yamanaka turned to Itachi and said, "And if you try to block it, then the kid dies." With a series of hand gestures, the Sarutobi said softly, "I'm sorry," before yelling the name of his technique. Kaden. Ryuka no Jutsu. The flame ball then moved in the direction of the kids. But when Naruto saw this, something inside of him exploded, causing his tails to begin flapping wildly and the clouds over the training field to suddenly begin circling as strong winds began blowing, snuffing out the dragon. Head. Shaped fireball. Naruto then let out a beastly roar, and a powerful gust of wind pushed the Yamanaka and Sarutobi away from him. Kurama no Kyubi. I seem to remember one of the reviewers requesting something like this, so here you have it. He then landed on all fours as all of his teeth sharpened and his claws lengthened before red fur abruptly began to grow out from his skin, completely covering his body as he grew in size. His head then elongated into looking like the head of a fox and the 9 tails morphed into one. You see, all of this as a result of your earlier hesitation, he has now begun to take on his actual form. As he glanced at the Sarutobi, who then made a series of hand signals, the Yamanaka yelled. Kaden. Jutsu no Ryuka. The ball of flames then engulfed Naruto and engulfed the grass surrounding him in flames, but the Jinchuriki appeared unfazed by the flames, as if they had no effect on him, as he turned his red eyes to the Sarutobi. Then, as the Yamanaka charged at him, Naruto brought the claws of his right forepaw closer to the man's throat before the fox's tail knocked him back. He then fled from the flames and charged at the Chunin, then leapt into the air and knocked him to the ground while landing on top of him. Then Naruto turned to face the Yamanaka and began to approach him slowly while snarling like a monster. Stop, Naruto-kun. Karin screamed as she attempted to rush to Naruto, but Sakura and Ino stopped her. Avoid it, he isn't himself. Ino uttered those words. Something flicked in Hashi's mind like a switch being flipped as he was taking in the scene, and he rushed in Naruto's direction. Hashi. Shikamaru shouted. When Hashi reached Naruto, the fox had hardly time to react before Hashi knelt down and struck his right palm into his stomach, where the seal was, after he had swerved through a series of hand signs as the kanji for 9 appeared in his right palm while he was running. The Senju blinked in bewilderment as he saw Naruto writhing in agony as he began to regain his normal state after wooden tendrils emerged from Hashi's palm and wrapped around him. What happened just now? He asked himself. When Naruto was fully recovered and the wooden tendrils dropped to the ground, Karin rushed over to give him a hug. How did you do that, Hashi? As she, Ino, and Shoji rushed to him in awe, Sakura questioned. Well, I suppose it's just pure talent. Hashi uttered those words, unable to recall any of the events that had just transpired. Before noticing the Yamanaka attempting to flee, Itachi thought, that was definitely Mokuton, but how could an academy student possibly pull off something like that? Stop right there, I'm not done with you yet. Then, flinching, the Yamanaka fled into the trees, only to be knocked out instantly when a man in a dog mask emerged with the now unconscious Yamanaka on his shoulder. The man said, I guess you needed my help, after all. Naruto.kun, can you use the Uzugen on these three? Itachi said, before approaching Naruto and bending down in front of him. Good work, Inu. What? Why? The blonde glanced up at Itachi and asked. The Uchiha answered, I just want to check something. Naruto closed his eyes and activated the Uzugen after saying, okay. When he opened his eyes again, he examined the three Konoha shinobi who were unconscious. All right. Karin inquired. As Naruto put it, there's something weird with their chakra. What are you saying? Choji inquired. I can barely see a pitch black dot in each of them, though it appears to be fading, said Naruto. Turning to face the unconscious Uchiha, Itachi remarked, just as I thought. I've seen that guy before, but from what I could see, he wouldn't have had the courage or guts to pull off something like this. However, what does that signify? Sakura inquired. Shikamaru looked at Itachi and said, it means that someone was either controlling them or manipulating them, right? Right. Itachi had answered. None of them, however, were aware that someone was standing atop one of the tries. The man said, HM, looks like I've finally found you, one of the three inheritors. Then he abruptly disappeared. Although it was possible that Naruto could transform into a miniature Kyuubi at any time and kill them all, as Itachi had explained, that was impossible as long as Naruto didn't experience great rage. Of course, at that point, Karin had joked that they shouldn't take away Naruto's ramen unless they wanted him to go berserk again. It had been 6 months since Naruto's attempted murder, and everyone had moved on and things had returned to normal. At the moment, they were all seated in the classroom when Daikoku arrived with multiple files and placed them on his desk. What do you suppose the purpose of those files is? Naruto inquired. Before Daikoku held up one of the files, Karin said, who knows? Before distributing the files to the different students, he stated, I have first semester reports. Sasuke, Karin, and Naruto all opened their reports as soon as they were delivered. Naruto Uzumaki. Topics. Course. General situation. First, 31 pupils. First, 91 pupils in Taijutsu. Ninjutsu. Third of 30.1 pupils. Third of 90.1 pupils. First, 91 students. First, 31 students Fuinjutsu. Person. 31st, 31 pupils. 91st, 91 pupils the first 9 teams. The first 20, 7 teams. Senjutsu. Second, 31 pupils. Second, 91 pupils. Sasuke Uchiha. Topics. Course. General situation. Second, 31 students. Second, 91 students in Taijutsu. Ninjutsu. Second, 31 pupils. Second, 91 pupils. Fuinjutsu. Third, of 0.31 pupils. Third, of 0.91 pupils. Individual. Second, 91 pupils. Second, 31 pupils. Team. Teams from the first 9 and the first 20, 7. First, 31 pupils. First, 91 pupils Senjutsu Karin Uzumaki. Topics. Course. General situation. Taijutsu. Students in the 20th, 31st, and 68th, 91st grades. Students in Ninjutsu. First, 31. First, 91 Fuinjutsu. Second, 91 pupils. Second, 31 pupils. Individual. Students ranked 24th out of 31. Students ranked 79th out of 91. Team. Teams from the first 9 and the first 20, 7. 6th, 31 pupils. 23rd, 91 pupils Senjutsu. Both Naruto and Sasuke were thrilled with the results, but Karin hung her head, assuming she had the lowest scores in the class. In reality, though, there was at least one student in the class with even lower scores, Haruno Sakura, who had only placed 30th and 31st overall, with the exception of Ninjutsu and Fuinjutsu, where she had actually managed to place 4th, and the team, where she had placed 1st, having been fortunate enough to be on the same 4-man team as Naruto, Sasuke, and Karin. Naturally, no one was surprised that Naruto and Karin had placed 1st and 2nd on the Fuinjutsu test, respectively, since they were both far more skilled than any other student, even the older ones, in that area. Afterwards, looking at his file while sitting on the academy's roof, Hashi saw that he had placed 2nd in every category but team, where he had placed 1st. This didn't surprise him in the least because it was always like this. After that, he glanced down at the little field outside the school building, where Naruto, Sasuke, and Karin were leaving as the day was coming to an end. He grinned, remembering what had happened months earlier, and was relieved to see them act as if nothing had ever happened. And what's bringing you such joy? Rika said, walking over to the boy. Rika, Hashi said as he looked at her before looking away with a light blush on his face while saying nothing. Where is Shin now? Rika looked around and asked. Why do you ask? Hashi inquired. Well, you two are hardly ever seen apart, Rika replied. Then Hashi added, he said he had some things to take care of. I guess you've got a point there. What sort of things? Rika inquired. No idea, was Hashi's answer. Alongside Karin and Naruto as they made their way back to the Uzumaki compound, Naruto and Karin bid Sasuke farewell. Usually, the three of them would meet up with Ino, Sakura, Shikamaru, and Shoji, but today they all wanted to show their parents the reports. Karin was still hanging her head, thinking about what Jiraiya would say when he saw her report. He would undoubtedly be very disappointed with her. Naruto, on the other hand, was his usual carefree self as they walked, though he was wearing an extra-large grin, clearly very happy about the results. However, the two failed to see their destination as they collided with someone, forcing them to back off as Naruto opened his eyes and Karin looked up to see none other than Sennin Arrow? With a tone of surprise, Naruto inquired. Hello, Karin and Naruto. Jiraiya remarked, I made the decision to come see if you received any high scores on your first reports. Naruto held up his report and said, yeah, look here. Jiraiya accepted it and read it. Naruto is really amazing. He congratulated the boy and then turned to Karin, saying, but I suppose that's just to be expected from the son of the Yondaime. And what about you, Karin? After a moment of hesitation, Karin flinched and held up her own report, and Jiraiya took it and looked it over too, then glanced over the top of the report card at Karin, making her flinch once more. In another part of the village after training in one of the training fields, Itachi was heading toward the Uchiha compound while reflecting deeply on something. He thought, I need to talk to Shisui later. He should be able to help me with what I should do, if anything. Itachi turned to see Shin, one of Hashi's friends, after hearing a voice say, Uchiha Itachi, I presume. And you are? Itachi inquired. Shin stated, the name's Shin, Hiyamakari Shin. The tone of his voice sounds like someone with many years of experience, but based on his height appearance, he can't be more than an academy student, 1 or maybe 2 years older than Sasuke, Itachi thought. The expression in your eyes tells me that you're giving something careful thought. When Shin reached into a pocket and took out a scroll, he said, well, whatever it is, it can't be that hard to figure out what to do for one with the mindset of a Hokage. He then handed the scroll to Itachi and said, there's someone I want you to give this to. Who is that? Gazing down at the scroll he was holding, Itachi posed the question. Itachi turned to see the child leaving after Shin said, you'll find out. Then, before opening the scroll, he glanced down at it once more, and his eyes widened, something that hardly ever happened. Compound Uchiha. The young Uchiha gulped as Sasuke sat on the floor in front of his father, waiting expectantly while Fugaku was now going over the report card and then looking up at Sasuke. Before placing the report on the floor and leaving the room, Fugaku said, keep this up, and you'll be amazing, just like your brother. Normally, he would have been a little disappointed in Sasuke because the boy didn't receive the best grades, but it was to be expected given that 2 of his classmates had been raised and trained by Jiraiya. Father, I wanted you to say, that's my boy. Sasuke thought, looking down at the floor with a dejected expression. Later that evening. What? Don't you know what tomorrow is? Sasuke was startled out of his slumber by Fugaku's shout. You simply don't comprehend your role. With Mikoto seated next to him, the Uchiha head continued to gaze angrily at Itachi. As he peered into the room, Sasuke wondered, what are they doing at this time of night and with the light out? Itachi declared, my mission begins tomorrow. What mission? Fugaku inquired. Itachi said, I can't tell you, it's covert. Fugaku closed his eyes in exasperation and then opened them again. You realize that you're the conduit between the clan and the village nerve center, don't you, Itachi? He uttered those words. Yeah, I said Itachi. Remember that. Come to the meeting tomorrow, Fugaku said. Sasuke. Fugaku and Mikoto were taken aback when Itachi said, go back to sleep. Why? Yeah. Fugaku stood up and walked a few paces in his direction as Sasuke pushed the door slightly aside. Why are you out and about at this hour? Return to your bed, said the head of Uchiha. Before going back to sleep, Sasuke glanced at Itachi and said, yes, father. Village catacombs the following day. Route HQ. A dark silhouette ran through the catacombs, followed by a number of others, all of whom wore masks with the kanji for route on them. The one fleeing from them turned to face Shisui, but his right eye was closed and blood was streaming from it, and his left eye was square. shaped rather than shaped like a typical Sharingan, with the exception that the edges extended out to the red iris's edges. Later, the Nakano River Itachi and Shisui stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the Nakano River. It appears that the Uchiha coup d'etat cannot be stopped at this time. Additionally, the other villages will undoubtedly invade Konoha if civil war breaks out. Before turning to face Itachi, Shisui stated, "When I tried to stop the coup d'etat using the Koto Amatsukami, Danzo stole my right eye. True war will break out." He turned to face Itachi and raised his left hand to his eye, saying, "I suspect he'll come after my left eye as well, so I'm going to give it to you before he has a chance." He then pulled the eye straight out of the eye socket, saying, "That one doesn't trust me. He intends to protect the village his way, no matter what it takes or how it looks." Before Shisui extended his eye for Itachi to accept, Itachi thought, "Shisui, my best friend, you are the only person I can rely on." Before Itachi grabbed the eye with his outstretched hand, Shisui uttered, "Please protect this village, and the Uchiha name, both." Itachi's eyes widened as Shisui retreated a few paces toward the cliff and leapt. "Shisui!" He yelled before running over to the cliff just in time to see Shisui's body disappear into the raging waves of the river. "Goodbye, Shisui." The following day, "Father only cares about you," Sasuke remarked while seated beside Itachi. "Sasuke, are you angry with me?" "That's fine, to live life being hated. That's one path for a shinobi," Itachi said, pausing for a few seconds before continuing. When Sasuke thought, "It's exactly like he said, the truth is, about my brother," he stopped himself. I don't think. Being the best is difficult. Being in a position of authority causes isolation and arrogance, regardless of how much people wanted you. However, it's only the two of us. Like a wall you must scale, I will always be there." Before they heard the door being pushed open, Itachi remarked, "Even if it means being hated, that's what big brothers are for." "Itachi, get out. We must speak with you." Two other Uchiha police officers joined the spiky-haired one as he yelled. "What is it? Why are you all here?" As he entered the foyer, Itachi inquired. "Only two individuals failed to attend the meeting yesterday. Where were you?" A long-haired person inquired. Sasuke thought, "So, it's true, Itachi didn't attend. We recognize that you have helped us get through a lot since we joined Anbu." The long-haired officer said, "Your father said so too, and he's trying to defend you, but..." The spiky-haired officer stated, "We can't make exceptions." "I get it. I'll exercise greater caution. Are we finished here now?" Itachi uttered those words. "Almost." Itachi looked at the spiky-haired officer, wondering what he would say. "We do have a few more questions," he said. "It's about Shisui, he also missed the meeting." Itachi's face became emotionless at this point. "Why?" Sasuke asked himself. "He flung himself into the river Nakano." The long-haired officer remarked, "We know that you were like brothers." Itachi said, his face now sad, "Well, yeah, I haven't seen him lately, it's a tragedy." The long-haired officer stated, "We are the police, Itachi. We have made the decision to give the investigation our whole attention." "Inquiry?" Before the spiky-haired officer took a note from his belt, Itachi asked. "This concludes Shisui's note." An analysis of handwriting was done. He claimed to have written it without a doubt. "What is the purpose of the investigation if there are no signs of murder?" Itachi inquired. Before his colleague gave the note to Itachi, the long-haired officer remarked, "For a Sharingan user, copying hand writing is easy." As Itachi read the note, the spiky-haired officer remarked, "The content of the note is all here, on this tiny piece of paper. These missions are getting old to me. Uchiha has no future if things continue this way. Alternatively, I can no longer run against the path." He was the best at Shunshin ever and among the clan's most gifted members. The officer with the spiky hair remarked, "He was always the first to take on any mission for the sake of the clan." The long-haired one remarked, "He wouldn't have given up his life or his clan this easily." "You shouldn't judge people by appearances or preconceptions," Itachi stated. "For the time being, we'll leave the note with you." The long-haired officer said, "Take it to Anbu and ask them to cooperate in the investigation." Itachi said, "Understood," before the three officers turned to go. The one with the spiky hair said, "Hopefully we'll get some sort of lead. We can communicate with Anbu through other channels." The third person who had not yet spoken said, "We'll know if you destroy the note. Why don't you say it directly?" The three officers stopped dead in their tracks and turned around with their Sharingan activated when Itachi asked, "You believe that I did this?" Itachi inquired as his Sharingan became active as well. The one with the long hair said, "In fact, we do, you child. Before he and his colleagues could respond, they were lying in the middle of the street with Itachi standing over them. "Itachi, if you did indeed betray the clan, you will pay," said the spiky-haired one. "As I mentioned, avoid making assumptions about people based on their appearance." Sasuke rushed to the door as Itachi remarked, "You misjudge me completely, if you think I have patience for you. The clan, you babble on, but you overestimate your abilities, and have no idea of the depth of mine, which is why you're crawling right now," Itachi replied. Sasuke thought, "I've never seen him like this. Shisui had been keeping an eye on you lately. A year has passed since you joined Anbu. What you've said and done since then is too odd to ignore." "Oh my god, what are you thinking?" the officer with the spiky hair said. "You cling to your organization, to your clan, and to your name, but you are narcissistic and arrogant, and you fear what you don't understand, pure idiocy." "Stop it, Itachi, that's enough. What's wrong with you?" Itachi turned to face Fugaku, the voice's origin. "Itachi, I'm concerned about your recent actions." "Why? I'm just busy with work," Itachi remarked. "So why did you not arrive last night?" Fugaku inquired. Itachi remarked, "I needed to achieve the next state." "What are you discussing?" Before Itachi abruptly raised a kunai and threw it into the wall, striking one of the Uchiha crests, Fugaku inquired. As Sasuke remembered something he had said, he said, "This pitiful clan has suppressed my ability. From the beginning, the Uchiha clan has been entrusted with the protection and security of the village. The Uchiha crest is a testament of the clan's great pride in their civic duty." Then he remembered hearing his father congratulate Itachi on his promotion to Anbu. "My boy is that. As I enter Anbu, I am filled with pride." You lose sight of what's truly important, premonition and imagination, when you become fixated on meaningless things like the clan. As long as you're constrained by rules and regulations, you can't make significant progress, Itachi stated. "What arrogance," as he and his co-workers began getting up, the long-haired officer remarked. Then, before this began, Sasuke remembered a few of Itachi's remarks. "Being the best is difficult. Being in a position of authority causes isolation and arrogance, regardless of how much everyone hoped for you." "Why, Ni-san?" the young Uchiha asked himself. "Enough." Fugaku helped the spiky-haired officer to his feet and then said, "Well, what are you going to do? If you keep saying this nonsense, you're going to prison." "We will not put up with this, Captain," the long-haired officer asked, "Give the arrest order." "Cease." Ni-san. Itachi twitched a little before collapsing to his knees as Sasuke screamed. "I did not kill Shisui, but I apologize for my inappropriate remarks, I'm very sorry," Itachi replied. "Lately, the heavy mission load for the Anbu appears to have tired him out," Fugaku said, glancing at him with his eyes closed. "Captain." The long-haired officer turned to face Fugaku and shouted. "Hokage. Sama has direct control over Anbu. Not even we can arrest him without a warrant. I will assume responsibility for my son, please," said Fugaku. Before Fugaku turned to face the house and proceeded to the door, the long-haired officer said, "Understood." Before passing Sasuke, he uttered the words, "Itachi, inside." Sasuke then saw that Itachi's eyes abruptly changed, and the three Tomo combined to create a windmill pattern. After a few months lying on his bed, Sasuke gazed at the ceiling. It has been some time since then, but he thought, what was that? My brother's eyes, that was, not a normal Sharingan, and there's tension between Itachi and father. Shortly after, he was crossing the walkway outside the house when he saw Itachi approaching and then passing him. He turned to see Itachi and Fugaku passing each other without even exchanging glances, and Fugaku stopped when he saw Sasuke. "Good morning, father," Sasuke glanced at the floor. "Oh, good morning. How has school been going recently?" Sasuke looked up and grinned as Fugaku asked. "Everything is fine," the boy said, laughing slightly at the last sentence. "Naruto created a seal the other day that could paralyze someone completely for an hour, and he tested it out on Kiba." Not long after standing with Sasuke at the edge of a walk over a lake, Fugaku blew out a huge fireball from his mouth. Sasuke thought, "Wow, amazing," as the flames went out. Basic Uchiha ninjutsu is this. Kaden. Jutsu no Gukakyo. The signs are exactly as I instructed. Fugaku advised building up chakra, holding it somewhere between the mouth and the chest, and then releasing it all at once. "You got it. Father is giving me direct jutsu instruction. Finally, I'm gaining his recognition. I can't let him down. I can do it," Sasuke said before swerving through the hand signs, thinking, "I can do it." He then stopped at the Tora sign, holding his breath before blowing out, though all that was visible was a tiny flame. This might have been too soon for you, Fugaku remarked before turning around and starting to return to the compound. I thought so, not quite like it was with Itachi. As he continued his training in the Gukakyo, Sasuke reflected, the Uchiha crest represents the will of those with fans who manipulate fire. Uchiha are considered full-fledged clan members only after they are able to use Kaden Jutsu. After a week as Sasuke walked up to his father, he said, "Father." The man turned around and looked down at him. "Please check my jutsu again. Teaching you that was premature. The same outcome will be obtained if it is taught again just 1 week later, according to Fugaku." "No, it won't, I mastered that jutsu, I want you to see it," Sasuke replied. Soon after, Sasuke was navigating a series of hand signals while Fugaku watched him, and they were once again on the walk across the lake. As he blew out a big ball of fire from his mouth, Sasuke thought, I can't mess this up. Kaden. Gukakyo no Jutsu. He turned around with a hopeful expression on his face, but as the fire went out, he saw Fugaku walking back towards the compound, which made him look down with a dejected expression. With wide eyes, Sasuke exclaimed, "Well done. From now on, live up to the crest on your back, better yourself, and soar to great heights." Fugaku said, "That's my boy." "Yes, I will." Sasuke grinned as he spoke, and, "One more thing, don't follow your brother anymore," said Fugaku. The following day, lying on his bed, Sasuke recalled one of the occasions when Itachi had stabbed him in the forehead. "I apologize, Sasuke." At a later date. Then he recalled some of the things Itachi had said the day he was charged with Shisui's murder, and how Itachi had carried him home that day. "My ability's been repressed by this pathetic clan." Sasuke thought, ever since that day, Itachi doesn't seem like my brother anymore. Sasuke soon came up to him as he was putting on his shinobi sandals in the foyer. Catching his brother's attention, Sasuke said, "Ni-san, please help me with my shuriken today." "Why don't you ask your father? I'm too busy," Itachi inquired. "But even I can tell that you're more skilled at shuriken jutsu. Why do you treat me like such a bother every time?" Itachi made a "come here" gesture with his hand only palm down in response to Sasuke's question, and Sasuke proceeded to approach the older boy only to be stabbed in the forehead. As Sasuke raged, Itachi said, "Sorry, Sasuke, maybe next time." However, he saw a dejected expression in his brother's eyes before the elder Uchiha stood up. He said, "I don't have time for this. You never have time, Sasuke, and you always stab me in the forehead and say, 'Sorry.'" As Itachi left, Sasuke rubbed his forehead and said, "It's always the same story." He then grinned and thought, "That's a relief. I guess he's still the same as always." He then saw the cracks from Itachi's kunai in one of the Uchiha crests on the wall across from the house. Soon after, Makoto was doing the dishes while Sasuke sat at the kitchen table eating breakfast. "I wonder what father really thinks of Itachi and me," Sasuke said, drawing his mother's attention. "What gives you the right to say that?" Makoto inquired. "That's my boy," the father said the other day. "Father always says that to Itachi." "I was ecstatic," Sasuke said. Makoto remarked, "Well, that's great." Makoto sighed as Sasuke remarked, "But, father and Itachi aren't getting along lately, so maybe I'm just a substitute for Itachi." "You are who you are, and Itachi is who he is. Your father loves you both," she said. "So why is Itachi at the center of everything?" Sasuke inquired. "That isn't accurate. However, as the leader of the clan, the father has an obligation to safeguard the clan," Makoto stated. "Yes, but what?" Sasuke inquired. "Itachi is simply older than you. He is therefore trusted to carry out clan responsibilities." Sasuke's eyes widened as Makoto continued, "But, you know father, always sullen. Looking and awkward." Makoto explained, smiling, and pointed to herself, "But just between you and me, when we talk, he talks about you all the time. Father is responsible for overseeing those responsibilities, so perhaps that's why he seems to pay more attention to Itachi." Then Fugaku came in and sat down while Makoto returned to washing the dishes. Before recalling the moment when Itachi's Sharingan changed, Sasuke pondered, but what happened between father and Itachi? Itachi's eyes when he looked at father that time, that was no ordinary Sharingan, and "Father," he said, drawing the attention of the Uchiha head, "are there various varieties of Sharingan? Are you already considering the Sharingan? However, it's too early for you. Kaden techniques are completely different from the Sharingan. Furthermore, it differs from your friend Naruto's Uzugan, which could be obtained by diligent training alone," Fugaku remarked. "But one day I'll get the hang of it, since I am your son," Sasuke remarked. It's true that there's a higher level of ocular jutsu than the Sharingan, it's called Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku replied. Mangekyo Sharingan, in Sasuke's mind. In Uchiha's lengthy history, this fabled ocular jutsu has only appeared in a select few. And I've heard that only certain circumstances can cause this kind of eye opening, Fugaku remarked. Special conditions, Sasuke thought, then remembered his father's words following his Gukakyo mastery. Don't follow your brother anymore. After thinking, don't follow my brother, he said, Father, why doesn't Ni-san ever take care of me? Despite the fact that I am his younger brother. Your brother's always been a little different, son, he doesn't like to get close to people, Fugaku replied. Why? Sasuke inquired. Who knows, I can't even read him, his own father, Fugaku replied. Before Makoto arrived with a bento box for him, Sasuke thought, I didn't understand what was happening then. Sasuke, come here. Your meal. As Sasuke accepted the bento, she said, I can assist you with shuriken practice when you get home today if you want it. Sasuke stated, it's training, not practice. I'm going. Shortly after, as he was leaving the house, he said, what a relief. Father didn't seem to really hate Itachi. Ni-san graduated top seat from the academy when he was only 7 years old. By the time he was 8 years old, he was able to use the Sharingan. And then at the age of 10, he rose to Chunin rank. However, I have the same Uchiha clan blood in me as my brother does. I won't take a backseat to him. Tower of Hokage before the four elders, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Shimura Danzo, Udatain Kaharu, and Mitokado Homura. Itachi, now dressed in his Anbu gear, was kneeling. This can no longer be tolerated. We are forced to condemn the Uchiha traitors to Konoha if they intend to declare a revolution and usurp our authority, Kaharu exclaimed. Kaharu, hold on, avoid making a snap decision, Hiruzen advised. But the Uchiha clan won't be deterred, Hiruzen. If so, we should take action to prevent chaos. That also applies to innocent children, Danzo remarked. Avoid saying things like that in front of Itachi. In addition, it will be difficult to fight the Uchiha. This needs careful planning, Hiruzen remarked. We should attack before they can move because we are running out of time. It will be over quickly if you, I, and our respective Anbu band together and launch a surprise attack from behind, Danzo stated. I'd prefer to use words before violence because the Uchiha are longtime allies in arms. Before turning to Itachi, Hiruzen said, Itachi, it doesn't have to be long, but buy me as much time as you can. I shall devise a strategy. Anbu headquarters Danzo and Itachi were later seen conversing outside the Anbu headquarters entrance. He is the type of man who will defend Konoha in the event of an emergency, regardless of what Sandaime, Sama stated. In that scenario, even Hiruzen, in his capacity as Hokage, will be forced to act decisively. The Uchiha will be doomed to annihilation the instant the coup d'état occurs, regardless of whether it leads to war or not, including your ignorant younger brother. But before there's a revolt, there's a way to spare just your brother. Your brother will probably learn everything if things work out. If he sees a Konoha shinobi massacre his entire clan, it will make him harbor resentment toward Konoha. Sadly, he will also have to die, Danzo explained. Is that dangerous? Itachi inquired. No, I prefer that you choose. Choose to support Konoha or the Uchiha, start the coup d'état, and perish with your clan. Before the uprising, save your younger brother, and then assist us in getting rid of every other Uchiha. Whatever the case, the village must be protected by putting an end to the chaos before it starts, and since you, Itachi, are a double agent for both Uchiha and Konoha, you are the only shinobi who can be trusted with this mission. Although it will probably be an extremely painful mission for you, Itachi, your younger brother will be spared as a result. Will you accept this mission? I know you care about the village. Itachi closed his eyes and turned to leave after Danzo said that. Compound Uchiha. As he dashed through the compound's entrance, Sasuke thought, I trained with Naruto for so long that it's gotten late. Then he noticed a silhouette kneeling atop a pole. What? I thought I saw something just now. Then, his eyes grew wide as he noticed several dead Uchiha clan members lying on the street. WH. What is this? He exclaimed before sprinting home, wondering, what's going on? Fugaku and Makoto were sitting on their knees in a room within Sasuke's house, while Itachi stood behind them wearing his Anbu gear, minus the mask. I see, so you've aligned with the other side, eh? Fugaku responded. Itachi uttered, Father, Mother, Makoto stated, we already know, Itachi. To get his son's attention, Fugaku said, Itachi, just promise us this. Take care of Sasuke. Itachi shuddered and began to cry, saying, I will. Fugaku spoke up as he realized this. Don't be afraid of it. You made this decision, correct? As Itachi sobbed, he remarked, compared to you, our suffering will end quickly. Regardless of how we think, I am still proud of you. You are a really thoughtful child. Just then, Sasuke reached the door to the room and yelled, Father, Mother. Sasuke, don't come in. His father yelled from the other side, but despite the warning, Sasuke still opened the door, only to see that his parents were lying dead on the floor. Father, Mother. Then he noticed his brother standing over their bodies. Ni-san. 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 Father and mother are. How? Why? Who would do such a? Before he could finish, a shuriken shot past him and embedded itself in the door after scratching his shoulder. Foolish little brother, Itachi said as he closed his eyes before opening them again. Mangekyo Sharingan. Sasuke was then forced to watch as Itachi slaughtered everyone in clan over and over again, and when it was over, he let out a painful scream as he fell to the floor. Why, did you, he managed to ask, to measure my capacity, Itachi said, causing Sasuke to think back to what he had said once. My ability's been repressed by this pathetic clan. Measure your capacity, you killed them, for that? Sasuke inquired. I had to. Itachi said. What's wrong with you? Sasuke asked as he quickly rose to his feet before charging at Itachi, but he soon tripped and fell to the floor again. Tears then welled up in his eyes. Afraid. He thought before running out as quickly as he could, but just as he got out on the streets, Itachi came out in front of him. It's not true. My brother wouldn't do this, because, Sasuke said as tears streamed down his face. Pretending to be the kind of brother you hoped for, was to determine your ability. You'll become the one through whom I can confirm my ability. You have that potential. You felt anger and hated me. You've always hoped to surpass me, so I'll let you live, for my sake. Just like me, you have the power to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. But there's a catch. You have to kill your closest friend, Itachi said, causing Sasuke's eyes to widen at the last part. Kill my closest friend, he thought as he instantly thought of Naruto. Just as I did, Itachi said, causing Sasuke's eyes to widen again as he recalled when those 3 officers had shown up to question Itachi. It's about Shisui, he flung himself into the river Nakano. We know that you were like brothers. That was, you killed Shisui? Sasuke inquired. And now I have the eyes, Itachi said, causing Sasuke to freeze as his brother continued. In the Nakano Shrine's main hall, under the 7th tatami mat from the far right, there's a clan secret meeting place. There's a reason we Uchiha have ocular jutsu, the truth is written there. Truth, Sasuke thought. If you open your eyes to the truth, then you will also obtain Mangekyo Sharingan. If that happens then I will be letting you live. Right now, Itachi said as he slightly moved his foot, causing Sasuke to flinch. You are not even worth killing. Baby brother, you're pathetic. If you want to kill me, settle for hating me, hate me and live, like the coward you are. Clinging to life without honor. He said as he turned around, looking at Sasuke over his shoulder with his Mangekyo activated. And someday, when you have the same eyes as I, you will find me again. Sasuke then froze before he started staggering, about to fall to the ground, but he managed to regain his composure as his eyes became red with 1 tomo in each. Itachi then shunshined away. Wait! Sasuke yelled as he ran after his brother and shunshined after him. As he landed on a roof, he picked up 3 kunai that were embedded there before throwing them at Itachi, but all they did was knocking Itachi's Hite.8 off of him as Itachi landed next to it and Sasuke landed on his knees behind him, his eyes now back to normal. Itachi reached down and picked up the Hite.8 before tying it around his head, though not in the normal way. Instead he wore it like a bandana with the metal plate over his right ear. He then looked over his shoulder at Sasuke with a rear coming down from his right eye as Sasuke collapsed. The following day, the next day, Sasuke awoke in a hospital bed. Dream, he thought before suddenly feeling a sting in his left shoulder, and as he looked down, he saw bandages before he recalled the shuriken which had scratched him. He then got up and headed to the Uchiha compound. Upon getting there he saw that the area had been sealed off as there were "Keep out" signs over the entrance, but that didn't stop Sasuke as he entered either way. Hello, Sasuke. What'll it be today? His aunt said as she and his uncle were in front of their store, and Sasuke smiled, but then he realized that they weren't there after all. He then walked towards his house as it started raining. He entered his home and headed towards the room where he last saw his parents to see that their bodies had been moved. He then fell to his knees, crying. Nakano Shrine. He decided to follow his brother's instructions and headed to the Nakano Shrine after the rain had stopped. He removed the 7th tatami mat on the far right to uncover a secret staircase, and he descended down into the secret meeting place where he found an old stone tablet with weird writing on it. "I see, so that's it," he said as he couldn't read any of what the tablet said. "Ninja Academy. Hey, Shikamaru. Wanna go to the candy store after school?" Shoji inquired. "Nah, I can't. Your mom's nice so it's okay for you, but if my mom catches me buying munchies on the way home, I'm in big trouble," Shikamaru said. "Did you hear? I heard the whole Uchiha clan got killed," a kid that sat behind Sasuke said. "Yeah, my father told me," one that sat next to him said. "I heard he's the only survivor," the first kid said. "Don't mind them, Sasuke. They don't know what it's like to suddenly lose their entire clan," Naruto said as he rubbed Sasuke's back, trying to comfort him. "Don't rub it in, Naruto.kun," Karin scolded him. "Ah, sorry," Naruto said. Uchiha compound, lake. Sasuke was sitting at the end of the walk over the lake as he recalled some things that his parents had said. "That's my boy, he talks about you all the time. What did father discuss, mom?" Before he picked up a small stone and threw it into his own reflection in the water. Sasuke uttered the words, "Papa." He then watched as the reflection changed into Itachi's, and he remembered some of what Itachi had said. "If you want to kill me, settle for hating me. Ni-san. No matter how dark the path, I will forge ahead in order to kill you. No matter what, I will gain power," Sasuke thought as he went into the water in a fit of rage. Hokage Tower. The night before, Itachi was kneeling behind Hiruzen, who was standing somewhere in the Hokage Tower. "Please don't reveal to Sasuke the true reason behind my actions." Itachi suggested that he should remain unaware. "I get it. Was there anything more?" Hiruzen inquired. "Yes," Itachi said, then produced 3 scrolls, including the one that Shin had given him. "Give these to Naruto when he's ready, and something else." "What is it?" Hiruzen inquired. "The real power of Naruto's Uzugen. I found out what it is," Itachi replied. With Naruto, Karin, Sasuke, and the rest of their class now 12 years old and nearing the end of what many had hoped would be their last year at the academy, it had been 5 years since the Uchiha massacre. Everyone in the class had now failed twice, but most of them were fairly certain that they would pass this year. The youngest age at which an academy student can graduate during times of peace is 10, but if they fail the graduation exam, they must remain at the academy for at least another year. With his feet on the table in front of him and his arms behind his head, Naruto remarked, "Man, I sure hope that we all make it this year." Karin was seated normally, her arms resting on the table to his right, and Sasuke was seated with his head resting on his hands as usual, to his left. "Hey, between your skills, my good looks and Sasuke Kun's ego, I'm sure we'll make it," Karin replied. "Now." A tick mark appeared on Karin's forehead as Sasuke remarked, "You'll need more than good looks to pass." "Duck. But, would you like to try me?" she called out to him. "Kurama no Kyuubi. The same clothes he's recently started wearing in my other story, Naruto. Shinobi hunters, with the exception of the cloak." The 3 had also changed their attire over the past 5 years, with Naruto now wearing blue pants and a fishnet shirt underneath a blue shirt with a grayish-blue vest over it that went down to his waist and had a hole in the back to show the Uzumaki clan symbol. Karin wore grayish-white pants and a long, sleeved red shirt that ended in a V-shape at the waist, with the Uzumaki symbol on the back in a deeper shade of red than the shirt. Her hair was now in a braided ponytail, and her bust had grown to a C-cup size, but these changes had nothing to do with her outfit. Kurama no Kyuubi. His canon clothes. I couldn't think of anything. Sasuke was dressed in white shorts, arm warmers on his arms, and a blue shirt with the Uchiha clan symbol on the back. Then, Iruka, their current instructor, entered the classroom. He had begun teaching them 3 years prior, the first year they had the opportunity to graduate. After putting down a stack of papers, Iruka walked over to his desk and looked around the classroom. When he saw Naruto, he sighed and said, "Naruto, take your feet off the table." The blonde scowled before following instructions as Karin laughed. "All right, class. As in the previous 2 years, we will begin with a written test." Before distributing the papers, Iruka said, "Complete all the questions on the paper, and when you're finished, come down here and place them on my desk." After everyone had won, he said, "Now, get started." After that, everyone took up their pens and began writing, but Naruto turned to his right to see that Karin was writing down the answers as fast as she could, and he noticed Sakura doing the same on the other side of the room. Since the academy began, the 2 of them had turned every test into a contest because they were the best in the class. But while everyone else was working normally, Naruto went back to his paper and started taking the test. It didn't take long for Karin and Sakura to finish, even at the same time. They exchanged glances before rushing to Iruka's desk, where they slammed down their tests simultaneously and started fighting, only for Iruka to break them up as everyone in the class, including Shino, started to perspire. Naruto was among the last to finish, but the only others after him were Choji and Kiba, which was quite unfortunate for one of the best students in the class. As the test went on, more and more students finished and walked down to Iruka with it before going back to their seats. Having completed each test, Iruka stood up after the written exam, then walked around the desk and spoke up. Iruka held up a notebook and said, "All right, now I want you all to line up and we will test your henge." Everyone followed instructions, and although the majority of the henges had some flaws, some were flawless and even appeared to have been completed by a chunin. Iruka then instructed the class to follow him, and he took them to the gym so that the Kawarimi could test them. Iruka began, "Now, I want you," but stopped when he noticed his fellow teacher Mizuki approaching him while wearing a shunshin. He spoke softly enough for the students to not hear. "Iruka, Hokage. Sama arrived and wants to talk to you." "Hokage. Sama?" Iruka inquired before surveying the pupils and saying, "I apologize, but an important matter has come up. I'll let Mizuki Sensei handle the rest." Before departing, he handed the notebook to Mizuki, who smirked as he glanced at it before turning to face the students. "I want you all to split into pairs and one of you will throw a kunai at the other, who will then dodge it with the Kawarimi," he said. "We have strewn logs throughout the room because, of course, Kawarimi won't work unless you have something to replace it. Additionally," he said, "you will all be using these wooden kunai in place of real ones in case some of you aren't able to pull off the Kawarimi in time or at all." He pointed to a table beside him that had multiple wooden kunai at the end of the sentence, and the students all moved to the table to retrieve their kunai. Naruto, whose sensitive ears had heard what Mizuki had told Iruka, remarked, "I wonder what Gigi wants with Iruka, sensei." "Yeah," Karin replied, since she could still hear it even though her ears weren't as strong as Naruto's because she had learned to read lips and because, as an Uzumaki, her ears were still stronger than a normal human's. "Well." Sasuke gave them a perplexed look. "Roof." Looking over the village and off the edge of the roof, Iruka approached the roof where the Hokage was waiting for him. "Hokage. Sama, you wanted to see me?" the Chunin teacher inquired. "How much do you know about the Uchiha massacre, Iruka?" When Hiruzen asked, Iruka became perplexed and stopped walking. "What everyone else knows, that Itachi murdered his whole clan," he responded. "Before the massacre, did you ever get to meet Itachi?" Hiruzen inquired. "Once, indeed." "Why?" Iruka inquired. "Did he come across as someone who would massacre members of his own clan?" Iruka looked down at the roof with a dejected expression on his face as Hiruzen asked. "No," he said. "Good." Hiruzen stated prior to turning around to observe Iruka. "It has recently come to my attention that there was someone else other than Itachi behind that incident. Someone who might very well have been manipulating us all from behind the scenes from the very beginning." Then Iruka turned to face Hiruzen, who said, "What are you talking about, Hokage? Sama?" "I'm currently putting together a team, one that will track down and, ideally, defeat this man. And I want you, Iruka, as the best Barijutsu master in the village, on this team," Hiruzen said, causing Iruka's eyes to widen. "I'll give you time to decide whether or not you want to be on the team. However, keep in mind that joining the team will immediately raise your rank to Jonin, which will grant you access to more of the village's secrets but also prevent you from ever teaching at the academy again." "Was that all?" Iruka inquired. "An additional item." Iruka looked at Hiruzen in confusion and he explained, "As a Jinchuriki, Naruto's chakra reserves are way too huge for him to summon a decent clone, no matter how good his chakra control may be, so it'd be pointless to just send him back to the academy for another year." Hiruzen said, "I want you to pass Naruto, no matter what his scores are on the Bunshin test." Before heading back down, Iruka said, "I see. I'll think about the offer, Hokage. Sama." The lesson after the Kawarimi test was finished. Mizuki took them outside the room where the results of their final test, the Bunshin, the one jutsu that Naruto couldn't perform no matter how many times he tried, would determine who would be the next genin. All of the students were then required to wait outside while Mizuki entered the room to prepare for the test. He eventually opened the door and beckoned the first person inside. As time passed, one student after another entered the room and exited with a hit. Naruto, Karin, and Sasuke were among the last to be called in because it was done in alphabetical order. Naruto's name was finally called after Karin emerged with a hit around her forehead. When he entered the room, he discovered that Mizuki and Iruka were seated behind a desk that had multiple hite Atesh on it. Naruto surmised that Iruka had arrived ahead of them, having gone directly there after his meeting with the Hokage. Alright, Naruto. You need to make at least 3 decent bunshins, Mizuki responded. After going over the hand signals, Naruto called out the jutsu name, which caused a puff of smoke to appear. However, after the smoke had dispersed, there was only one bunshin on the floor, appearing to have just run from Kumo to Suna without stopping. This is his 3rd attempt at graduation, but he still can't even make a decent clone. But even so, his scores and everything else are quite impressive, Mizuki said, turning to face his fellow teacher. What do you think, Iruka? Before he went into deep thought, Iruka said, you're right. He then looked at Naruto and grinned, saying, it seems you failed this test, Naruto. But since it would be a waste to keep someone as talented as yourself held up in the academy, I've decided to let you graduate. He then held out one of the Hite.8, which made Naruto smile. After thanking the teachers, the blonde took the Hite.8 and left through the door. After the door shut behind him, Mizuki turned back to face his teacher. He asked, you sure you made the right call by giving that to him? Iruka paused to consider Hiruzen's words. He replied, yes. I'm very sure. The door then opened once more, drawing the attention of the 2 teachers as Ino entered, the final test subject. As Iruka and Mizuki emerged shortly after, Ino returned with her own Hite.8 before informing everyone that they could now go home because they had all graduated and that they should return in a week for the team assignments. Sakura's question to the redhead was, hey, Karin. Chan, Ino. Chan's holding a party to celebrate graduating, wanna come? With a dreamy expression in her eyes, Karin said, nah, can't. Naruto.kun said that if we managed to graduate, he'd treat me to dinner to celebrate. Hinata was behind a wall in the background, glaring at Karin and creating cracks in the wall where she was grasping it. Sakura frowned and remarked, you're lucky. Wish I had a boyfriend. Karin stroked her friend's head and reassured her, don't worry, I'm sure you'll find someone someday. For a moment, Sakura looked at Sasuke and said, yeah, maybe, before they heard Naruto calling. He waved at her and said, oi, Karin, Chan, you comin'? Karin turned around. Right, coming. She exclaimed as she began to sprint toward the blonde, adding, see y'all later, Sakura, Chan. As they began to walk, the blonde turned around and put her arms around Naruto's right arm, resting her head on his shoulder. Naruto's tails then wrapped around her waist. In reality, the two had been dating for about a year, but they had known for a long time that they were in love because of their closeness and more than just Naruto's emotional intelligence. They simply feared that their friendship would be ruined if they attempted to start a relationship. A week later, Kurama no Kyubi. I'm terrible at romance, so I'm sorry if anyone wanted to see, well, read, their date. When Iruka entered the classroom, everyone was seated. Then, he began to go into great detail about what it meant to be a ninja, what a ninja was supposed to do, and so on. He eventually reached the intriguing section, the team assignments, after some time. Before reaching the intriguing teams, he went through teams 1 through 6. Team 7 will be Uzumaki Naruto, Uzumaki Karin, he said. Yosh! Exclaimed Naruto. Karin declared, we're on the same team. Iruka went on, getting the pinkhead to say, yes, before he could finish, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke. As he gazed at Iruka, Sasuke's only answer was, HN. Shikamaru questioned, wait, why are there 4 members on their team? Before moving on to the next team, Iruka responded, because we have an odd number of students this year, so it was either 4 on one team or 2 on 2 teams. Before revealing who was on Team 9, he stated, Team 8 will be Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, and Aburame Shino. When he finally reached Team 10, he stated, Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Choji. As Ino muttered to herself, great, I'm stuck with the lazy ass and the fatso. Shikamaru muttered to himself idly, I'm on the same team as Ino. What a drag. Iruka left the classroom after saying, now then, I have to go, but you'll all wait here for your Jonin senseis to show up. Then, as sensei after sensei arrived to collect their teams, Naruto, Karin, Sasuke, and Sakura were the only ones left after everyone else had left with their respective senseis. Naruto screamed angrily, come on. Why's he taking so damn long to get here? An hour had passed since the last team had departed with their sensei. Furthermore, Karin had attested to the fact that they were the only people remaining in the academy. Everybody's attention was drawn to the redhead when she said, wait, someone just entered the academy, and it's a Jonin from the looks of it. Naruto said angrily, well, finally, before getting up and moving toward the desk. Sakura said, hey, what are you doing? After figuring out what her boyfriend was going to do, Karin placed a chair in front of the door, and the blonde picked up a rubber and walked over to the door, opening it slightly. Before placing the rubber between the door and the door frame to keep it stuck until someone came to open it, Naruto climbed up on the chair. As Naruto leapt from the chair and pushed it aside, Sasuke remarked, "He's a Jonin, Naruto. There's no way something as simple as that will ever work." Sasuke. "Kun's right, so just put it back where you found it," Sakura responded. Karin turned to Naruto and said, "We won't know until we try. Right, Naruto-kun?" she asked. Naruto nodded and said, "Right." As Karin felt the Jonin approaching and Naruto moved away from the door, she said, "He's coming." Then, the door opened, and the rubber landed squarely on the man's head, making Sasuke laugh. Sakura laugh inwardly, and Naruto and Karin laugh. "That was great," cried Naruto. Karin tried to hold back her laughter and said, "You got it, Naruto-kun. And he shoots and scores. That was awesome, Cha," Sakura said, contradicting her inner voice. "I'm sorry sensei, I tried to stop them, but..." "Is this our Jonin teacher?" Sasuke pondered. All four of them had to take responsibility after the Jonin said, How should I put this? Based on my first impression, I'd have to say, I hate you." They were on the roof shortly after, the four Genins sitting on a couple of steps and the sensei on the railing. The Jonin said, "Now, introduce yourselves." Karin said, "Introduce ourselves? Tell me your names, what you like, stuff you hate, your hobbies, and dreams of the future. That kinds of stuff," the Jonin replied. Sakura said, "Why don't you start, show us how it's done." "Me?" inquired the Jonin. "Yeah. After all, we know nothing about you, you're a mystery," Sakura replied. Well, my name's Hitaki Kakashi, I don't feel like telling you what I like or not, and my dreams for the future are none of your business. But I have a lot of hobbies." The Jonin, who is now known as Kakashi, replied. As Sakura and Naruto nodded, Karin whispered to the others, "We didn't really learn anything but his name, though." Kakashi gestured to Naruto and said, "Why don't we start with you?" "Me? The name's Uzumaki Naruto. My likes are Karin, Chan, ramen, and hanging with my friends. My dislikes are the people that see me for what I contain and not for who I am. And my dream is to follow in my father's footsteps and become Hokage," the young man replied. It appears that Hokage Sama was correct. He is aware of his ancestry. Despite this, Kakashi stated, he doesn't seem to resent his father for sealing the Kyuubi into him. The blonde concluded, "My hobbies are pranks and practical jokes, I guess." Before turning to face Karin, Kakashi remarked, "I see, next. I'm Uzumaki Karin. My likes are Naruto-kun, reading, and hanging with my friends. My dislikes are the same as Naruto-kun, and my hobby is studying our clan's history. My dream is to one day help restoring the Uzumaki clan. Oh, and to become a great wife for Naruto-kun," Karin replied. Before turning to face Sasuke, Kakashi reflected, "Well, she has her future planned out for her. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. There are plenty of things I hate, but I don't see that it matters considering there is almost nothing I like. Dream? That's just a word, but what I do have is determination. I plan to restore my clan. And there is someone I have sworn to kill," Sasuke continued. Both Karin and Naruto thought, Itachi-san, someone he has vowed to murder? Who? Sakura pondered. Before turning to Sakura, Kakashi thought, "I thought as much. Now, it's your turn, Pinky." Sakura was startled out of her reverie and said, "Oh, right." She then turned to face Kakashi and introduced herself as Haruno Sakura. "I enjoy reading and hanging out with my friends, but I detest bullies and those who denigrate others. Although I prefer to study medical jutsu, studying is also one of my hobbies. My goal is to surpass the renowned Tsunade Sama as the greatest medical kunoichi." Once the genin had taken 4 paper forms, Kakashi said, "Your first mission will start tomorrow, and remember that if you fail, you'll be sent straight back to the academy." Well, would you look at that? They all have pretty ambitious goals, he thought. "Nani? What then was the purpose of the exams for graduation?" Karin inquired. "Oh, that? To get rid of the cases that had no chance of recovery. However, only 9 or 10 of the 30 graduates, or 30.1 in this instance, will turn into ninjas, according to Kakashi." "That is nonsense. Are you implying that our 2 attempts to pass the graduation exams were in vain?" Naruto shouted. "Not at all. Come to training field 3 tomorrow," Kakashi said, causing the 4 to gulp. "If you couldn't pass the graduation exams, you wouldn't last a day as a ninja. Oh, and I advise you not to eat breakfast unless you want to throw up." He then walked away. The following day when Naruto woke up the following morning, He felt a gentle sensation beneath his head and rubbed it without opening his eyes. He heard Karin's voice and then opened his eyes to see that he was pressing his head against her left breast. His face turned red as a tomato before he sprang up into a sitting position. Well, it looks like someone's having fun. Karin merely giggled before getting out of bed, as nude as the day she was born, but he bowed and said, sorry. Come on, we need to get to the training field to meet up with the others, she replied. All right. Should I go to the restroom first? Karin stopped walking, turned around, and pointed at something as Naruto spoke, looking over her shoulder. All right, but while you're at it, you might want to take care of that. Or perhaps you would like my assistance? Naruto blushed more intensely as he looked down to see a bulge in the covers after she said that. No, after saying, I'll take care of it, Naruto jumped out of bed and hurried to the restroom, with Karin grinning as she took care of him. Of course, they had never had sex before. The closest they had come was when Naruto touched Karin's breasts, but the redhead had long dreamed that Naruto would finally take her virginity, all three of them, and so far he'd only taken one. The two had been sharing a bed for many years, and Karin had never worn any clothing while she slept, a habit Naruto had eventually adopted. After that, she went to get dressed. Field 3 of training. Sasuke arrived at the training field shortly after Naruto and Karin did, followed by Sakura and Kakashi, who arrived 3 hours later. You're running late. As the Jonin approached, Sakura, Karin, and Naruto screamed. I apologize. However, an elderly woman asked me to assist her cat in descending from a tree. Kakashi said, smiling nervously and scratching the back of his head. Yes, exactly. Naruto remarked, as if it would take 3 hours to get a stupid cat down from a tree. Anyway, how about we start the test? Kakashi uttered those words. Before Kakashi rang out 3 bells, Sakura, Karin, and Naruto pondered with a drop of perspiration, way to change the subject. Bells? Sasuke inquired. Yes. Kakashi set a timer on the middle stump and said, oh, and also, if you fail to get a bell, you'll be tied up to the stump and have to watch me eat your lunch in front of you. If you are able to take these bells from me by noon, you will advance to the second part of the test. If not, you will be sent back to the academy. As their bellies growled, the 4 preteens all thought, so that's why we weren't allowed to eat any breakfast. Karin said, but wait, there are only 3 bells. Exactly. Thus, one of you will undoubtedly return to the academy, Kakashi stated prior to fastening the bells to his flak jacket. Before examining the other 3, Sasuke pondered, so we'll end up being a 3-man team after all. Huh? In that case, I say we ditch Sakura. She may be smart, but she's not nearly as skilled as myself, Naruto, or Karin. So that means that no matter how well he or she performs here, one of us will be sent back to the academy. Naruto wondered, but what if none of us gets a bell, are we all sent back then? Sakura thought, only 3 of us will pass. I can't possibly keep up with Sasuke-kun, Naruto, and Karin-chan. However, Karin had the impression that there was more to this test than first appeared, and I'm guessing that if none of us gets a bell, we'll all be sent back to the academy. You won't receive the bells if you don't attack me as if you intend to kill. All set to go. After Kakashi pressed the timer's button, the 4 of them fled in 4 different directions. When Kakashi looked around, he thought, stealth is the most important skill of a ninja. Then he thought, good, they've managed to hide themselves well. Karin, she looked down into the clearing where Karin was hiding in the leaves on a tree branch. It's odd now that I think about it. The entire setup for this test suggests that we'll be competing against each other, but Sennin always taught us that teamwork was the most important aspect of being a ninja, possibly even more so than stealth. She thought for a moment before her eyes widened in realization. Perhaps that's the purpose of this test, to test our teamwork, even though it seems like we'll be competing against each other. But why are there only 3 bells? She asked herself. Karin closed her eyes and tried to sense out the others, thinking, either way, I can't think of that now. I have to find the others before they go and do something stupid. Now let's see. The closest one is Sakura-chan. Her eyes suddenly snapped open, and she shunshined in Sakura's direction. Naruto. A short while later, Kurama no Kyuubi. I discarded the scene where Karin meets Sakura because I was literally stuck on it for 2 to 3 days. From his crouch in the bushes, Naruto thought, well, I know that a mere genin, even one as good as me, can't defeat a jonin. I might be able to do it though, if Karin-chan and Sasuke were supporting me, but it seems like we're being pitted against each other here, so teaming up with them might be a bad idea. Naruto-kun. Karin spoke just loudly enough for him to hear, and he glanced in the direction of her voice in time to see Sakura and the redhead arrive. Karin. Chan. Sakura. Naruto uttered those words. I've discovered the purpose of this test, Naruto.kun. Or the majority of it, anyway, Karin remarked. Really? Naruto inquired. Yes. He's putting our capacity for teamwork to the test. I suppose he did that to see if we could still function as a team, which is why he made it seem like we were in competition with one another, Karin said. But why only 3 bells are present? Naruto inquired. As Karin put it, I don't know. Now that they were all there, it was time to come up with a plan. Everyone turned to face the source of the voice and saw Sasuke leaning against a tree before he stepped forward with a smile. The Kakashi in any case. Kakashi was still standing in the center of the clearing when he took out an orange book called Icha Icha Paradise, and began reading while he waited for the genin to attack or for either one to attack alone. He caught the shuriken with 2 fingers on his left hand without looking, but he was taken aback when one of the shuriken exploded into smoke, revealing that it was Naruto. The blonde swung down the kunai he was holding in a reverse grip with his right hand, and as he had anticipated, Kakashi stepped backwards, even though it made room for the kunai's true target, the threads holding the bells. Naruto threw the kunai at the threads, but Kakashi realized what he was doing and leapt back as the kunai struck the ground and the blonde landed. With Sasuke standing behind him, holding his hands in the Tora sign, the Jonin appeared to loosen his stance. A Jutsu Kaden. A genin like you could never possess the chakra required to accomplish such a feat, Kakashi remarked. Sasuke exclaimed. Kaden. Gukakyo no Jutsu. Before inhaling, you're underestimating the Uchiha, Kakashi. Then, from Sasuke's mouth, a huge ball of fire was directed at Kakashi, engulfing the Jonin. Did he do it? After the Gukakyo had disappeared and Kakashi was nowhere to be seen, Naruto inquired. Naruto.kun. He's beneath you. From a high tree branch, Karin shouted. Under me? Naruto asked, and he looked down just in time as a pair of hands came out of the ground and grabbed his legs. Huh? Doden. Jutsu no Shinju Zanshu. Naruto was abruptly pulled beneath until only his head was visible above the ground, and Kakashi appeared above him, still wielding the shuriken but without the book he had been holding. Kakashi stared at Karin before hurling the shuriken at her, thinking, so she's over there. The Uchiha then spun around and aimed a kick at Kakashi's head with his other foot, but the Jonin simply leaned his head back, avoiding the kick entirely. Sasuke then charged at Kakashi and attempted a punch, but the Jonin easily blocked it with his palm. The Uchiha then attempted a kick at the Jonin's gut, but it was blocked again. As he landed with his hands on the ground, Sasuke thought, Kuso. He then released his caught foot from Kakashi's grasp, rolled forward on the ground, and stopped beside Naruto. He then placed a hand on Naruto's jacket, just behind the neck, and lifted the blonde from the ground. When Naruto, who was on his hands and knees, got up and charged at Kakashi, he pulled out a kunai in a reverse grip and swung it at the Jonin, but the Jonin reportedly just stepped back to avoid it. Nevertheless, Naruto spun the kunai around before striking it at the Jonin once more as Sasuke approached him with his own kunai, and they both swung the sharp knives at Kakashi simultaneously. Kakashi leapt back to avoid them, but the kunai were thrown at him, and he knocked them both out of the air with just his hand. He jumped out of the way when Sasuke's second Gukakyo came flying at him, even though that was exactly what Sasuke wanted. Now, Sakura. 6 kunai were hurled from somewhere in the trees and made their way directly toward the Jonin when the Raven head screamed. Kakashi, however, landed with one foot on the ground for a split second before scoffing and avoiding the kunai. As he resurfaced on the ground, he thought, so that's where Sakura is. However, a chain abruptly emerged from the ground beside him, and as he tried to jump away, it encircled his left arm. This is, he thought. Karin, with a scratch on her right cheek and blood streaming down from it, was crouching on the ground in the tree line, a chain emerging from her stomach and sinking into the earth. I learned about chakra chains 2 years ago, just before our first graduation opportunity, and I haven't shown it to anyone yet, not even Naruto.kun, she reflected. A chain? Sasuke inquired. Then Naruto added, come on, let's go and get the bells. It must be the trump card Chan told us about. The blonde then startled him by tossing one bell in Sakura's direction and the other in Karin's direction, or at least where he thought she was. Kakashi was left with little choice but to stand there and watch as they grabbed the 3 bells. Sasuke grabbing 1 and Naruto grabbing 2. The chain then relaxed, then dropped and retracted into the earth as Sakura approached them, soon to be followed by Karin from the other direction. With all 4 genin now in front of him, Kakashi thought, I must say, I never expected their teamwork to be this good. So, Kakashi Sensei, what do you think of that? With a proud swell of his chest, Naruto asked. Then, in a pose reminiscent of a thinker, Kakashi uttered, well, you Naruto, you even voluntarily gave up your opportunity to become a ninja, which is admirable, and your teamwork is better than I had anticipated. Naruto laughed proudly and said, heh. Kakashi then continued. But you understand what this means, don't you? Naruto's eyes twitched as he asked. Not long after, as Kakashi stood in front of the three genin who had received their bells, with their bento boxes on the ground in front of them, and Karin, Sasuke, and Sakura seated on the ground in front of him, Naruto had been tied to the central stump. Does this imply that Naruto is returning to the academy now that the three of us have passed? Sakura inquired. Oh, no, you see, this test was designed to assess your ability to work as a team under pressure, but I'm sure you've already figured that out, haven't you? Kakashi uttered those words. Yes, I did figure that out. However, I was baffled as to why there were only 3 bells, Karin remarked. That was to see if there was one amongst you willing to sacrifice him or herself in order to save the others, Kakashi responded. Are you implying that we all pass, then? With excitement, Naruto inquired. According to Kakashi, no, what? What are you saying? Karin inquired. You mean none of us made it through? Even after we succeeded in capturing the bells? Sakura inquired. No, this test is actually divided into 2 phases, and we are now going into the second one. However, I will give you a half hour to eat your lunches and regain your energy because this phase is much more difficult than the first one. Oh, and don't feed Naruto. If you do, I'll send all of you back to the academy, Kakashi added. What? Why? Naruto inquired. Before turning back to face the 4 of them, Kakashi remarked, because you didn't get a bell. Remember that on a mission. My word is law. He shunned away after saying, and the same thing applies here. Soon as Karin stared at the tree in question and used the chopsticks to bring some of the food to her mouth before eating it, she thought, strange. He's still hiding behind that tree. Then, for what was likely the umpteenth time, Naruto's stomach growled, and Karin thought, I hope he's at least not paying attention. She got up and turned around, holding her bento in front of Naruto's face, a piece of food in her chopsticks inches from the blonde's mouth, and whispering, gape up. Karin. Chan? Naruto inquired. What are you doing, Karin? Chan? Sakura inquired. All of us will need to be at our best in order to defeat Kakashi Sensei. Furthermore, I can't just let Naruto-kun starve like this, Karin remarked. Sasuke grinned and remarked, she's got a point there. Before starting to eat, Naruto exclaimed, Karin. Chan. However, a huge cloud of smoke suddenly materialized, and Karin turned around as Kakashi appeared in front of them. He halted in front of them and said, you, pass. What? Said the 4 genin. You mean that we pass? Karin inquired. Trash ninjas are those who break the rules, but even worse than trash are those who desert their friends. The purpose of this test phase was to determine whether you were capable of making your own choices rather than simply acting like mindless zombies who obeyed every order from your superior. With a thumbs up, Kakashi said, and you all passed with flying colors. Yosha. Hey, Datbeo, we're ninja. Naruto cried out. All right. It's unbelievable that we all made it, Sakura cried out. But all Karin and Sasuke could do was smile. So, how about we go have lunch? After saying that, Kakashi turned around and began to walk, with Sakura and Sasuke following him as Karin untied Naruto. Karin put her arms around Naruto's left arm as the 2 of them began to follow the other 3. Hey, Naruto-kun, how about we celebrate this by you taking me out to dinner later? Naruto blushed as she whispered, and after we get home, we could celebrate it in a different way, leaning into his ear. Office of the Hokage Hiruzen had been watching the test while seated in his office, a crystal ball resting on the desk. Ho ho. They seem to have grown up a lot, he said, turning to face 3 scrolls that were resting on the desk. These were the scrolls that Itachi had given him, and he remarked, perhaps it's time I gave these to Naruto. Then his attention was drawn to a knock on the door. He said, come in. Iruka went inside and shut the door after him. Iruka? Before the Chunin spoke, Hiruzen inquired. I accept. When Naruto woke up in his and Karin's bed, he opened his eyes and looked down to see the red-haired beauty sleeping in his arms, as nude as the day she was born. The memory of the previous night made him blush. They had celebrated being genin with a date, gone home as they always did after dates, and then Karin had thrown him into a passionate make-out session as soon as they were in the bed room, beginning to undress before it escalated into full-on sex. Naturally, They wouldn't have been old enough to engage in such activities, but there were benefits to being a ninja. Before Karin stirred, Naruto pushed a few of the hairs across her face away, and as he grinned down at her, her red eyes slowly opened to meet his blue ones. Naruto said, "Good morning, lovely. Wasn't yesterday fantastic?" Karin pressed her head against the blonde's chest and asked. Naruto played with her hair and said, "It sure was." Karin dragged out the word, "say," before turning to face Naruto and asking, "Want to try it again?" "Well, you mean now?" Before continuing, Naruto questioned, "Don't we need to meet with Kakashi, Sensei and the others?" "Just a quickie, please?" Karin dragged out the first word as she grabbed Naruto's semi-erect member and slid her right hand down his stomach. "All right. Only a quickie, though," the blonde answered. Naruto got out of bed and made his way to the bathroom as Karin sat down on the bed, panting. He said, "I'm going to go take a shower." Karin spoke up as soon as she had recovered her strength. "May I come along?" With hope, she inquired. Karin pouted as Naruto said, "Sorry, but if you did that, we'd just end up doing it again." Naruto then went through the bathroom door that led to the bedroom. Later, following breakfast as Karin was washing the dishes after finishing their breakfast, Naruto heard a knock on the door. Naruto walked to the door and said, "I'll get it." He then opened it to reveal Sasuke. "What do the two of you do? Sakura and Kakashi are expected to meet us shortly," he stated. Before long, the three of them were making their way to the training field through the streets of the Uzumaki clan compound. Although he regularly visited the Uchiha graves at the compound, Sasuke had been living there since soon after the Uchiha massacre, when Naruto and Karin offered to let him move in because the Uchiha compound now contained too many unpleasant memories for him. While they were walking, Karin noticed a person in front of them standing in the center of the road, facing the right side, and gazing up diagonally, as if she were disoriented. Before greeting her fellow female Uzumaki, Karin said, "Hey, it's Rika. Chan." "Oi, Rika. Chan." However, Rika then turned away from them and walked down the street, causing Karin to stop waving her hand as she looked at the girl confused. "Huh? Apparently, she didn't hear me." Since then, even though it took some time, Rika and Karin have become close friends. Rika was also offered a place to live at the compound, which was much better than the tiny compartment she had previously occupied. She initially turned down the offer, but ultimately accepted it. Field 3 of training. Although there were no indications of Kakashi, which was somewhat expected, the three discovered Sakura was already there when they got there. "That's a first, then," the pinkhead remarked, a little irritated. "You three are being late." Before crossing the training field and leaning against one of the stumps, Sasuke pointed over his shoulder at the two Uzumaki and said indifferently, "Blame it on them." After 3 hours, "Hey," when he appeared, Kakashi said. "You're running late." Sakura, Karin, and Naruto pointed at him and shouted. After that, they embarked on a number of missions, such as tending to some dogs, gardening, and other pointless tasks that might be classified as chores but are most definitely not appropriate for a shinobi. In the Hokage Tower's mission assignment room, they reported back to the Hokage once they had finished everything. "Well done, Team 7. Hiruzen declared, "Your work for today is finished." The genin were about to depart when the Hokage interrupted, saying, "Hold on, a moment." He then turned to face Naruto and said, "Naruto. What is it?" Before Hiruzen placed 3 scrolls on the table, Naruto posed the question. Naruto, Sasuke, and Karin's eyes widened as he said, "These are for you." Naruto took 2 of the scrolls, and Karin took the 3rd. The Hokage then went on, "Before he left, Itachi asked me to give you these scrolls." "Did Itachi-san?" Gazing down at the scrolls he was holding, Naruto posed the question. "Who is Itachi?" Sakura wondered. "What would Itachi do? Why didn't you stop him?" Sasuke asked, glancing at the Hokage before his face erupted in anger. Sakura had never seen Sasuke so enraged, so she was perplexed as she looked at him. "Because Itachi would have been able to get away regardless of my efforts." Sasuke gave a furious grunt before turning around and leaving through the door, slamming it behind him. He was one of the village's best Anbu, and knew all parts of Konoha like his own back pocket, Hiruzen said. "Kun Sasuke. Hold on," Sakura shouted and chased after him. Subsequently, Naruto placed the scrolls he was holding into the pouch of his weapon, and Karin did the same. Then, they turned to face the door, and Naruto glanced over his shoulder. Before he and Karin trailed behind their 2 teammates while the Hokage and Kakashi took care of them, he said, "See ya, G.San, Kakashi, sensei. Did Itachi tell you anything else?" Kakashi inquired. "Something about the Uzugin, Naruto's dojutsu," Hiruzen answered. Random Road in Konoha, or, more accurately, Kurama no Kyubi, the road where Naruto and Gaara first met in the canon. Sakura stood behind Sasuke as he grunted and slammed the side of his right arm into a wooden wall. Gosh! He uttered those words. Sasuke-kun, Sakura pondered. Hey! You guys also became ninjas at last, huh? As they raised their heads, they saw Senju Hashi crouched on a tree branch above them. Hashi. As he and Karin also arrived, Naruto remarked. Before leaping to the ground, Hashi said, "Well, hello there, Naruto." He was dressed in grayish, blue trousers, a pale brown open, sleeveless jacket with the Senju clan symbol on the back, and a darker brown shirt over a fishnet shirt underneath. His Hide.8 was wrapped around his right bicep. As he examined the preteens, Hashi remarked, "Even though there are typically only 3-man teams, excluding the Jonin Sensei, I'm not surprised that the 4 of you ended up on the same team." "We don't have time to speak with them, Hashi," Shin said. "We're supposed to be meeting up with Sensei," as he unexpectedly showed up beside Hashi. His outfit included a black open leather coat that hung down to his feet, with the yin-yang symbol on the back, black and white outlines on the white and black halves, a gray jacket that hung down to his waist, a dark blue shirt underneath, black trousers, black gloves on his hands, and a Hide.8 around his forehead. Sasuke said, Shin always made him tense for some reason. Hashi, Shin is correct. Rika, who also showed up next to the Senju, said, "We can speak with them later." Wearing a cyan shirt that hung down to her waist, arms that extended past her wrists, blue pants, and a sleeveless blue vest with the Uzumaki clan symbol on the back, she wore her Hide.8 around her neck. "Hello, Rika. Chan. I called for you when we saw you earlier at the compound, but you didn't respond," Karin remarked. "I apologize," Rika remarked, "I must not have heard you." Before his gaze met Shin's, Naruto surveyed the 3 elder genin, and then he heard Shin's voice in his mind. "Take caution, Naruto-san." Naruto's eyes widened as he said, "There's someone out there who would love nothing more than to get his hands on you." "Hey, is something wrong, Naruto-kun?" Karin looked at him anxiously and asked. "No, it's nothing," the blonde said, turning to face Shin and thinking, did Shin just, but before he could finish thinking, a different voice could be heard. When the members of Hashi's team turned around and saw a tall man standing there, Naruto, Karin, Sasuke, and Sakura said, "So this is where you've been." He wore a pale brown trench coat with the Konoha Jonin uniform underneath, and the Hide.8 plate was sewn to the trench coat, roughly over where his heart would be. What Naruto found most striking about him, though, were his eyes. The left one, which was nearly hidden by his hair, was red, and the right one was blue and glowing. He also had short red hair that went down to his left, nearly covering his left eye. Hashi said, "Sensei." "Well?" After giving Naruto and the others a quick glance, the man said, "You guys are friends of Hashi, Rika, and Shin? You can talk to them later, but right now we have a mission to do," he said, casting a glance down at his students. "Hurry up." Before their sensei turned around and the 3 followed him as he began to walk, Hashi and Rika said, "Right." However, as the members of Team 7 took care of them, Naruto, Karin, and Sasuke's eyes widened upon seeing the Uzumaki clan symbol on the back of the man's trench coat. "What is it?" Sakura asked, staring bewilderedly at her 3 teammates. Sasuke said, "That man has an Uzumaki clan symbol on his back." "All right." Sakura uttered those words. The remaining Uzumaki dispersed throughout the elemental nations following the destruction of Uzushio and Ero. Sennin's spy network monitored most of them. Karin explained, allowing Sakura to process the information before continuing, "Of course, there are some that even Ero Sennin didn't know about, like myself and Rika. Chan's family. But then, one by one, they all started vanishing until everyone that Ero Sennin was keeping tabs on had disappeared. Why, though, would he be unaware of a Konoha Jonin? That's Ryu Uzumaki." The 4 genin then turned to face Kakashi, who was standing there, adding, "Since he's earned himself several aliases. The most known being the Human Dragon. He had arrived in the village 5 years prior, just one day after the Uchiha massacre." Gazing at Ryu's retreating back, Naruto thought, the Human Dragon. Field 3 of training while holding one of the scrolls and gazing at its seal, Naruto's eyes widened as he and Karin were at the Memorial Stone training field. They had placed 2 of the scrolls on the middle stump. "This is," he began. "Tell me, Naruto-kun." Karin asked, her eyes widening as she approached him and saw the seal for herself. The Yondaime Hokage's seal. the kanji for Yan encircled by flames. The contents of the scroll caused Naruto's eyes to widen even more. He said, Kage Bunshin, Rasengan, Hiraishin, these are all two. Sans Jutsu, TT Ibeo. How was this obtained by Itachi-san? What about the others? Karin asked as she grabbed one of the scrolls and her eyes widened upon seeing the Uzumaki clan symbol. She opened the scroll and saw that it was filled with advanced, high-level Fuinjutsu. These are Uzumaki Fuinjutsu. Additionally, they are all too complex for anyone other than a Fuinjutsu master to even comprehend. However, neither of them realized that Mizuki, fully dressed in his shinobi garb, was spying on them from the tree line, with a pair of large shuriken on his back. Hee. You're mine, Kyuubi brat, he said softly to himself before turning to face Karin and remarking, and that goes for that demon slut of yours as well. He was about to advance when he felt a hand on his shoulder, but just as he turned to attack whoever it was, he discovered that he was completely immobile. The man who touched his shoulder from behind him said, Don't bother trying to move, I've blocked your entire nervous system as well as your Kirakuki, effectively paralyzing you. Who are you? Mizuki asked, trying in vain to glance over his shoulder. That depends on your answer. I could either be a friend who'll give you power like no other, or an enemy who'll make you experience pain the likes of which you could never imagine, even in your wildest nightmares. The man replied. Answer. What is the question, then? Mizuki inquired. What are you looking for? The man inquired. What am I looking for? Confused, Mizuki inquired. The man nodded and said, What you want? Mizuki turned to face Naruto and Karin. My goal is to eliminate the Kyuubi brat. His heart is still beating, and I want to tear it out and let him see me break it, Mizuki shouted the second sentence, but it seemed that only the two of them could hear it. Then, grinning, the man took his hand off Mizuki's shoulder and stood up, saying, Then get up and follow me, and I will give you the power to do just that. When Mizuki realized he could move once more, he got up and turned around, asking, Where to? The man held out a hand wrapped in a black glove and said, Take my hand. Mizuki accepted it, and the two were abruptly drawn into a vortex before disappearing. Field of Training Naruto picked up the third scroll, which had 4 kanji on it, each in one of the 4 clock directions of 3, 6, 9, and 12. The kanji for Ryu was on the right, the kanji for Ho was on the bottom, the kanji for Tora was on the left, and the kanji for Kame was on top. The center of the scroll was completely blank, as if the person who made the seal had meant to include something there but had forgotten. When Naruto attempted to open the scroll, it refused to do so. Hey, what the? What is it? Gazing up at him from the Uzumaki scroll, Karin posed the question. As he attempted to pry open the scroll without success, Naruto remarked, This scroll won't open no matter how hard I try. How about attempting to add chakra? Karin mentioned, I've heard that some scrolls are sealed, and can only be opened if you pour chakra into them, before continuing. Naruto said, Okay, I'll try. He attempted to add chakra, but as soon as he did, a red aura of chakra surrounded his entire body. Then, the chakra abruptly entered the scroll, and an image of Naruto appeared in the seal's blank space before the scroll opened. Karin said, Well, I didn't expect that. Naruto's eyes widened for the umpteenth time as he perused the contents of the scroll, and he exclaimed, What is this?
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.